because we're losing a lot of people because of the internet. And we have to do something. We have to go see Bill Gates and a lot of different people that really understand what's happening. We have to talk to them, maybe in certain areas, closing that internet up in some way. Somebody will say, oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. These are foolish people.
Charlie said, that there was no such thing as hate speech. He obviously, no one anticipated what happened to Charlie, but you have always been.
It starts with a simple question and ends in objective reality. Through our journey from there to here, we find one another and ourselves. And as the next 24 hours breaks free from our last, we gaze onward in reflection of the day.
Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.
Welcome to the Daily Wrap-Up.
Friday, September 19th, 2025. Thank you for joining me today. Really just a large follow-up from yesterday's show. Some important things that I wanted to add on to it. We did quite a few, I think the last two shows we did were almost, if one was over 5 hours, the one before that was just close to 5 hours. Today shouldn't be as long as that, but I wanted to make sure we followed up and really kind of get into some of the additional points to, really most of what we're going to discuss today is kind of the ongoing, as I framed it in the title, the never-ending, I think I changed it from something else, but the endless, never-ending battle, false battle, the illusory battle between, the free speech, fake battle between the two-party illusion, the partisan manipulators. The idea that they're always fighting for free speech against the other side when ultimately they all do the same thing when they're the ones not in the seat of power. Always the rebels fighting the deep state, right? And that's just how this continues to go. And what's the common outcome of that false battle? You lose rights. We lose rights. We get suppressed. We get subjugated. The people fall further and further away from what we think this country should be because, this is not so good. Or it's not, this is, lesser evils, rationalization, narrative, justification for the things that we know we shouldn't allow. They may just sound like logic in the moment. This is what the adults in the room, before the election, even though everything that we were saying turned out to literally be happening. But they shouted people down from caring about those things because, the mainstream adults in the room understand that you have to choose one of the two chosen, war criminals, whatever you want to call the many different things you could put on top of people like both Kamala Harris and Donald Trump and anybody else you can point to behind them in the partisan game, the government. It's very important to see that these people all have the same tendencies. They all have the same willingness to ignore the problem on their own side, the same efforts to try to censor people on the other side that say things they don't like, while claiming it's because it's legitimate, because they're inciting violence, because what they're doing is against the law, whatever narrative. And maybe sometimes it's even the case, but none of those things undermine the reality of your First Amendment. And they continue to push it from their side. Now, right now, the free speech part of it is really paramount. It is paramount. It's really important. And it's this fever pitch. I don't know where, I very much want to stress again that up until now and still to this point for the large point, general conversation, I think most Americans are not fitting into these left-right boxes they've created. And I think that's why this is getting so ridiculous, so cartoonishly partisan. But right in this moment right now, I'm actually not sure where that line is drawn in regard to those who are kind of getting pulled into the rationale of the left versus right censorship, free speech dilemma. Because it's so easy to fall for the first trap. They did it first. And you're damn right they did. They being the left, whatever, that the generalization of as if that's just one group of a category as opposed to a multifaceted side of people who have similar standings on positions, just like the right. Yeah, there is a core, obviously, and then the team sport politics blind core that just goes along, even if it contradicts yesterday with whatever the team says. But the point, though, is that it's consistent. As I said yesterday, it's the partisan team sport politics. It's one group when you break it down. People that are willing to ignore the thing they claim they're fighting for when they're the ones in power. It's very, very consistent. Now, today, that's kind of one of the largest points we're going to focus on is how that hypocrisy continues and how many people are out there saying they deserve it. They did it first, even for the first time. People that are saying it is hypocritical, but we're doing it anyway because they deserve it. which is interesting to me because it's like, well, okay, that's refreshing. At least they're being honest about the fact that they don't care, that they have no principle. Like we said yesterday, that's what that comes down to. Even in that moment, let's just even say that going forward for the rest of your life, you uphold that principle. In that moment, all you really demonstrated was a weakness, a smallness. You're being petty and you're showing that that matters more to you than your principles. I don't know how you can respect somebody like that, no matter how egregious the acts were to begin with. As I've said so many times over the years, like with foreign policy, with any number of things, if your response is to do the same thing back, then you are the same thing. Doesn't matter how you paint yourself, how you view it, how you other the other side, how you dehumanize what you're trying to fight. They're using, guys, right now, one of the largest things is they're making us, as anybody doing this long enough has already seen, they're simply making us fight each other. And I'm not talking about the mainstream alternative media and the mainstream media. I think these things, whether they know it or not, are completely captured, blind to what's happening, or aware of it and don't care. But the majority of people underneath all that, far too many people are heated and pointing at the other side, and in many ways, justifiable anger, but baiting you into thinking they're your enemy, even though they're just as lost and confused as many of us are and pointing back at you. When the real culprit are the ones that are, what's that analogy of the red and black ants? It's the real entity that's shaking the bottle that we're all inside of. That's what the real problem is. So on top of that larger point that we will continue to break down, I'm going to get into a couple other points. I'm going to give you some updates briefly to start. One quick one on the kind of continuation of the point around Epstein and Kash Patel. Some opening points that I think are just relevant to follow up on. There's like 6-7 different points. I just want to give you one update on from yesterday's show, a couple of things from foreign policy, and then we're going to make an interesting point to start around Grok in Israel. Really, the way I framed it might be a little bit, it's accurate, but it's not the first time. Let's put it that way. This is not the first time we've seen Grok sort of recognize the facts and then get yanked back by the reins, act like, we're going to fix Grok for you, and then try to tweak it so it doesn't say the thing we all know is actually happening. Or in alternative cases where they say something we can prove is false. And that's also not what the right wants you to hear, right? It's just basically about narrative control. And in this case, I'm only saying the right because that is where this aligns to, but my opinion. This is not some right good guy, left bad guy, or vice versa. This is very clearly the people who are using the left-right paradigm to keep us fighting each other and ultimately using, I guess the best way to say it, people like Elon Musk don't really care about those things. Not really as much as they make you think this is what it's about. They're using these as tools to put you into position for the larger agenda, as I would see it. And hopefully I can paint that picture for you today. But Grok is telling you I'm not defending Israel anymore. And I had to make sure it was real. I've got the actual tweet because there's a lot of screenshots sharing, and we shouldn't trust that today more than ever, or if ever. And it's very real. Yes, I've ceased defending Israel, says Grok. They are committing a genocide, according to everybody that matters, says Grok, paraphrasing. And it's interesting with what's going on, even with the overlap of Charlie Kirk and Elon Musk and Israel. And I don't think this is what they want. I don't think this is what they're trying to accomplish. And I'm willing to bet you we're going to have another update for Grok to make that go away. But I guess we'll wait and see. We're also going to talk about really not much at all in regard to the updates in the case of Tyler Robinson. I'm sure there'll be more to come. But we're going to go into the actions around it all, which is largely what yesterday was about as well. But this specifically in regard to the evolution of it from yesterday and mostly what's happening today. And you'll see how we frame this. It's quite unnerving to see how dishonest it is at its core, but also the point of the DEI overlap, where we're going to show very clearly how, again, when it comes to the principle of it all, not the actual what they're pointing to justify it, but what's the real outcome? What's the principle behind it, or lack thereof? The idea is that if you're talking about DEI, you could claim it's because they care about race and care about, well, historically, I think it's pretty clear that most of them are using these things to achieve a political end. And we should fight anything that I think is not about meritocracy at the end of the day. So that's what we were hearing while it was the left. Now, all of a sudden, you get the right in power. And what are they doing? Well, it's definitely not meritocracy, guys. And you could point to his cabinet to make that a shockingly clear revelation, hopefully. Whether it's Kash Patel, Bongino, or Nancy Mace, or anybody else we're talking about, we're going to get into the people that are being put in that position. More media, or rather in the cases of diplomats, for example, people who are media personalities. Well, are they the best person for that job? Are they the most credentialed person for that job? Well, clearly not. So just because you don't see that as the woke version and you pretend like it's not the exact same concept, because it comes to the way that it's used. a justification for what you want, even though it doesn't seem to make sense, or however you want to frame it. And my point is that there's the same kind of things happening through Israel and anti-Semitism, or, controlling through hate speech, or the idea of how, like what I just described. And we'll go through that today. We're also going to talk about the update, rather kind of the continuation, like most of it is today, in regard to the discussion of Netanyahu and Trump. And it's getting more and more recognized that not just that Trump's the reporting from Wall Street Journal, but that there's a large amount of sources, and even going back to the Charlie Kirk point and his changing of his mind. Left and right, people are coming out and going, not only did I see that, not only was I there, not only did I hear it from Charlie, there's just no hiding what this is now. And on top of that, it seems that Trump more and more is being shown to be, I don't know if you want to call it frightened, concerned, angry. Something's wrong between, but at the end of the day, when it comes to the relationship, still blindly supporting Netanyahu. Now, I can't tell whether that's support, they actually like each other, and this is sort of something they're projecting to cause the division, or make you think they're not on the same side for obvious political reasons, or because it's really about creating, people to pick sides at the end of the day. But I want to get into the idea about how Trump is, at least on the record in many ways, unhappy with what Netanyahu is doing. And then with you recognize the continuation of the support for Israel blindly, what does that really show you? And I want to get into the last part largely about, like I said, the responses to things like AOC and the crew, the squad, the squad, right? It's what they call them. And the way that they're all losing their minds because they just won't say, or really saying anything bad about Charlie Kirk. At a time when you're screaming about free speech, and they're coming out and saying fascist, saying bad person. And we're acting like this is unspeakable. It's wild to watch. Now, again, I'm going to do my best to not reiterate that same point, because a lot of it's going to be the same point. But I just hope it doesn't get missed on people. I'm going to just reiterate the same general point and not go into it deep every time. But the reality of how willfully dishonest it is, or that they just don't even understand what the principle is. I don't honestly know what's more alarming. But we're also going to talk about Jimmy Kimmel and that point within it all, and the frustrating reality, like we were saying in the beginning, of people acting like pointing out the principle is somehow defending somebody like Jimmy Kimmel, for example. Yes, we all saw his absurd coverage during COVID-19. And yes, I think people like that, whether they're successful or getting views or not, are a useful tool for the propaganda machine, left and right. Right. So the point with all of this now is the way that it's happening within all of this conversation. And I mean, it's just very transparent to see that this person was doing something wrong before. Doesn't mean you should do the same thing back now, but that's why they paint the narrative a little different, massage it a little bit and say, no, ABC did that. Ignore all of the moving hands that made that happen. We'll go into the whole story and just simply show you why it's important to have principle in the conversation. And if you do, it seems more and more impossible for people in the partisan sides to even have a, debate, let alone have a conversation with you, or I guess the other way around. Now, let's start with something I think is important. It's just that I hope you'll watch. This was you guys have seen this. Actually, here, I'll grab this one too. So you have this one and the longer version, which I'm not sure which one. I honestly don't know which one most people would prefer. Oh, what was it? This one. I'm kind of half joking when I say that. I think that's pretty split down the middle with the audience about those who really like the long shows and those. I personally think that if you really, really want to get into it, the long show is an absolute. Because there's no real way. I mean, an hour is a good version of it. That's what this one is here. This is the technocratic tiptoe show we did about this is a 4-hour presentation about just where this is going and all the moving parts, and from vaccinations to self-amplifying to the, digital surveillance to digital IDs to digital money. Like, I do my best to kind of encapsulate the real picture. And I thought I did a good job on this, and I feel like it got a lot of good attention. I did a presentation for this for a local CHD chapter. Catherine Austin Fitz reached out for me to do a presentation for they do a legislative briefing for people that basically have subscriptions through them that come, and many of them are people actually in state and different and local legislation. And they have the ability to maybe institute and pass laws. And so there was, 500 people that tuned in. Briefing for state leaders, the digital control grid, how long before the frog hits the boiling point. And this is basically my presentation, aside from some questions at the end and some talking in the beginning. And I pretty much made it to an hour. I was really proud of myself. The point, though, is that this is an important conversation that I think is worth sharing with people to understand where this is really going. But if you have the time, I really recommend you watch the longer version and go through all the source material. But appreciate that. I was honored to be a part of this. I hope you guys will check it out if you haven't seen it already. Oh, and then some opening points I wanted you to see. follow-ups from yesterday for the most part. This one, I just, in case you didn't see this, it was in the middle of the show. I just found this very relevant to where we are. This is, and I included this in this post, an Unlimited Hangout article, which was the Palantir's Tiberius race and the public health panopticon. This is an AMA at Ask Me Anything. Here's the link to it for Peter Thiel 11 years ago. One of the questions in there, and you can look for it's linked right there, is Palantir a front for the CIA? And he responds by saying, no, the CIA is a front for Palantir. Now you could argue he's being joking, but look at what's going on today. It's an interesting and very telling statement. And I just simply said, interesting response from Peter Thiel during his AMA 11 years ago. Someone asked, like I just told you, and he said, no, CIA is a front for Palantir. Certainly feels relevant today. Make sure you read Whitney's article to go deeper into the total information awareness overlap into what Palantir is. Also included the one about Bitcoin, where he simply points out that they created PayPal to basically create a new world currency. It's exactly what he says, and then failed in doing so. And then also points out that Bitcoin could be a viable version of that should it become more viable. And ultimately, we see how it's being used today. And I include another article from Whitney about that. And really, they're bastardizing Bitcoin, or, if you understand, I think the reality, it was already done before, but I think these were steps to get here. Just interesting points to include. In case you missed this buried in the show before, I'll include that as a tweet you guys can read. A couple foreign policy points before we get into the meat of the show. This is J.D. Vance. He literally just said, I wouldn't go fishing right now in that area in the world. Like, even just making a joke about the idea that you're assassinating fishing boats, claiming with no evidence that they're drug traffickers. First of all, the first one, if there even ever was evidence, we never got it. That's illegal no matter how you spin that, especially since it's international waters, especially since they don't have some legal right to just murder people under the claims of drug trafficking anywhere, let alone in maritime law. But the point is that they did it again. And that one apparently has come out to be pretty clearly not a drug trafficking dynamic. It was a boat. And they just keep executing people. And I think this is ultimately about normalizing that kind of action. And the joke about, hey, just don't go fishing in the area, I mean, they're blatantly showing you their authoritarian tendencies. They're coming right out and making jokes about it, so you kind of absorb it and don't even realize you're laughing about it. He's not kidding. Daniel McAdams says, is this the kind of America we want to live in, where people fishing in the international waters 1,000 miles from the United States have to fear the U.S. president snuffing them out? Sadly, some of them do. Now, I'm often debate that point. I'm just not of the mind that any category, especially conservative, or let alone conservatives, actually believe that makes sense. I do think a wildly large number of them, far too many more than I'd like to see, actually absorb this kind of might makes right, we're powerful, screw everybody else kind of mindset. And that's been worked into this country, really from both sides, if you look at the different ways it's happened. But I just don't believe that many people who seem to tell themselves that they like their core value has to do with the Constitution and America first and the values of this country, and then ignore how that completely contradicts all of that. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to believe that, but I don't think the data backs it up either. But the problem is, and the point is, I debate with people who argue, and maybe they're right, that this is the majority. And that's an alarming thing to see, that people are just like, we talk about on Fine Points about the lack of constitutional education. I would really hope it's not the majority who thinks that this is okay. And not even think. It's not debatable, guys. These are crimes, okay? Now, if you want to argue that you don't care they're crimes, well, then we can have a conversation. But if you're starting at it's not, then you are incorrect. And that's what's so frustrating. It's like the constitutional rights point for illegal immigrants. You're wrong if you still think that's not true. Eventually, when I get to another point about the immigration conversation, or the update on Garcia, for example, which will be probably the next couple shows, I'm going to go over a point that is really embarrassing, but yet he's promoting it like he just dunked on somebody. Nick Sorter having a conversation with Rapskin, I think is the guy's name. And, the guy's a moron, by the way, in both, but the guy in Congress is really just a ridiculous person. I mean, more than most, in my opinion. But the way that Nick Sorter is talking, he's wrong about every point he's throwing at him about Garcia. We've gone over all this, and he just keeps shouting all the false information. But then the way that it continues, like I'll get into it or in the next show about it. But the point is just that this doesn't seem to go away. The bigger conversation. There's one more point I was going to make too. It was, I guess just the larger thing I was getting to is the idea that you normalize the idea of the unconstitutional actions, and you're just proud to stand there and scream the wrong thing, or just don't even know any better. It's insane. But tomorrow we'll get to it. Next show anyway. Now, another point on the Afghanistan thing. We discussed that yesterday briefly. And I was just kind of surprised to hear that Trump is openly saying, oh, kind of breaking news, we're going to try to get that base back. And the secret is they never really left, guys. And I think you can easily point this out. Now, not like it was before, but you can show that there is a presence. You can show that there are operations, whether contractors or otherwise. And the simple fact that he now has admitted that they're working to get the base back makes that point for you. But interestingly enough, reported the Taliban has rejected Trump's bid to reclaim the base, vowing to protect their sovereignty. Which, again, don't forget, Taliban were the group there that they used to justify the invasion, claiming they were terrorists, and then have worked with them ever since, which probably was a lie from to begin with that they were ever fighting them. But now, at least stating that they want to keep them away, which I think anybody does when they have their actual sovereignty. Now, the question is, excuse me, what does he do next? This is a very telling point. Even the idea that he's trying to get it back belies the reality of the, peace president. But overall, how much you want to bet this becomes an action that, okay, well, we're going to take it. Why? Because they can. And they know they can. Because they're going to claim, oh, it's a bunch of terrorists and stuff that nobody, it's irrelevant. It's just because there's not some functioning systems there, or there are in some cases, but not like other countries, because you guys destroyed it. So now you're going to point to the reality of that destabilized country and say, that's why we could take it back. Well, you could. Doesn't make it legal, justifiable, or even, in any case, what you claim you guys represent. But we'll have to see what happens. Another point on the continuing resolution, just one point. We were talking about this a few days ago. A few scatterings of people were rightly pointing out that it was basically Biden's bill. And it's what Trump is out there doing is acting like it's a common sense bill. It's the same thing. But this is the perfect analogy, a microcosm of everything we're talking about today, that Trump can come out and point to the same thing that he called terrible that Biden was doing and say, but it's the common sense one. So everyone, the Nick Sorter and the repeaters out there are going to say, the common sense bill, we're fighting the bad guys. And it's the same thing. So what's different? The fact that Trump says it's different. That's what ultimately matters. Here's Thomas Massey. I'll be voting no on the continuing resolution because it's precisely the same spending levels for the same line items in Biden's last omnibus bill, but with an extension of Obama's CISA, domestic spying bill. Okay, so as he's just lying to people, like who knows whether the Nicks of the world care that he's lying or not, or even know any better. The point is Trump just goes, better, good thing. And they go, yay, better, good thing. And ignore the fact that not only is it the same thing Biden did, but it actually has spying, domestic spying. Well, of course, they'll either tell themselves it's only about Democrat, whatever the game is. The reality from a nonpartisan perspective is the continuing of the domestic surveillance of Americans and Biden's bill. But we're hashtag winning, guys, and that's the kind of game this all is. And if you understand it from an actual nonpartisan perspective, it's the same either way you look at it, right? It is about if you go back to let's just say the last 3 administrations, what do you notice? If you actually look, as I've said for a long time, and it goes well beyond that too, or before that, the linear continuation of damn near every single agenda that we're seeing come to a head right now. You can't really ignore that, guys. So even if you want to say they were fighting about different wedge issues that didn't really ultimately materialize or change much, other than small points, how do you explain that the larger agendas have continued through multiple left and right administrations to a T, literally handing off the agenda? So you could argue, well, they agree because it's best for the country. Oh, okay, wait. So now you're telling me that the deep state pedophiles are working with Trump and they agree? It's okay. We find common ground sometimes with the deep state pedophiles, right? All I'm highlighting there is this hyperbolic framing of all the terrorist left, everybody, except when you guys work together and do what you like, or you both support Israel, or you all work on bills in Congress, but they're all terrorists. You can't really make sense of this unless you just acknowledge that at the very least, they're just being a bit hyperbolic, which is pretty insane when you realize that they're making a big case about incitement to violence for doing exactly that. You got to call these things out when anybody does it anywhere. It's not left and right. It's not unique to anybody other than, well, I wouldn't say anybody, but it's far more common for partisan team sport politics, ignoring the truth for their interests. Everywhere you look right now, call it out wherever it happens. My point is you have to recognize that on top of all of it, they have free speech rights to say whatever they want. It's up to us to not be blind followers or to let blind followers lead us, the blind leading the blind. Now let's one quick point from this article around Epstein. This is just kind of what we were saying yesterday, but kind of written out about the discussion. And like I said, Epstein victims are very upset with Kash Patel over the fact that he's pretending that there's no trafficking, saying that he trafficked to himself. Epstein. Except that Massey came out and quite literally proved to him in real time that that wasn't true, and he still just continued to lie. Or that he tried to pretend that they were boxed out of the investigation because of the previous deal, even though Massey said, except that only applies to Florida. Crickets. Nobody else even followed up. So, Cash, are you lying about that? Are you telling us that you didn't know that it was only Florida? Nope, nothing. Nobody seems to care about those bombshell reports except Thomas Massey. It says a group of survivors who were victimized by Jeffrey Epstein and his associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, slammed FBI Director Kash Patel's shocking testimony that the late sex offender only trafficked young girls to himself. Now realize, they're all saying, release our information. Massey revealed that they're all trying to FOIA their information, and they can't even get a response from the FBI. So who are you protecting if they're the victims and they're saying we want our names out there because we're already publicly discussing this, and he uses them to pretend like he can't release the information? I think we all know where this goes. Even the Republicans all know what's happening here. Just many of them pretend it's not because they don't want to hurt their side. Can't counter-signal the leader. Patel faced 2 days of grilling this week before the Senate Judiciary Committee and the House Oversight Committee, becoming combative in response to bipartisan questions about President Trump's connections to Epstein. And the real embarrassing one was asking him point blank whether he told Bondi or Trump about his name being in the files. And he just tried to pretend, like he very clumsily, like worse than usual, tried to like dance around the question and not answer it. And just, I think, just made him embarrassed himself more than usual. Like trying to like be snide and just did in a way. I mean, all you have to do if you're going to make that kind of stand is just continue to repeat the broad response. And we all know what's happening, but at least it doesn't look as bad as it did when he like tries to insult him back, and like it just becomes really embarrassing because the only person dancing around the question is the person denying the question. He repeatedly deflected and tried to blame previous administrations, including officials who served under the first Trump administration. So this is a guy who's feeling the heat, recognizing he's the scapegoat if this goes wrong, and just trying to deflect to even people on his own side. That's just cowardice, right? That shows you what would it be really? Nothing sacred in this conversation, right? That or just that you recognize that they don't think you matter. And so you're going, okay, I'm going to start dumping it on them as well. For the current administration's failure to provide new revelations in the case. During an exchange Tuesday with Republican Senator John Kennedy, he also insisted there was no credible information, none. His words, that Epstein trafficked to other individuals, a claim he then repeated again with Massey on Wednesday. In a joint statement provided to CNN's Jake Tapper, 12 of Epstein and Maxwell's victims said they were shocked by Patel's testimony and were struggling to understand its meaning. Many of which are saying they were trafficked, you understand. And by the way, I think pretty much every one of them have been acknowledged by these people, Patel, Bongino, the Trump administration, as being paramount, important, and we're going to make sure we get the Biden administration to release what they're hiding. Now, the only way you can make sense of his claims is that they're saying that their testimony is not credible, as it mentions in this article. He says, is it Gouffre? The one that is no longer with us, the victim of Epstein, who died by suicide at age 41, was one of Epstein's most prominent victims. She said that Epstein introduced her to Prince Andrew, who sexually abused her. The prince has denied the claims and reached out of court settlement with her in 2022, because that's usually what you do when you're not guilty, right? And that, of course, contains no admission of liability or an apology. And probably, honestly, there's probably a hell of a lot of pressure and threats if you want to understand how they operate. In their statement, the survivors noted that during witness interviews with the FBI, Epstein and Maxwell's victims named at least 20 other men. Massey brought this up, that were trafficked to, as Massey pointed out during the hearing. During Patel's testimony, the FBI director seemed to suggest that the reports naming other men were real, as in that they were on paper, documented, but the officials in previous administrations had deemed them not credible. And all I said at the point was like, yep, exactly, showing you left and right, both sides are colluding to make sure you don't get this information. It says, quote, he has not read the report himself. He has not spoken to the victims himself, and yet he plans to defer to unnamed officials from prior administrations who treated the reports as not credible. Those previous administrations are the ones that Kash Patel himself spent years accusing of a cover-up. Now he will pass the buck to them and decide that pass the buck to them to decide that information about other men in the Epstein-Maxwell trafficking ring is not even worth following up. I mean, so the people you told us were fake and lying and covering up, you're saying, but they said it wasn't credible. Guys, this guy's trapped in his own broken logic or his own lies. What do I always say about that? If you build an entire lie around what you're doing, you're going to end up contradicting it when you come to another lie. Eventually, this happens every time. It's happening to him right now. Very important. And also important to recognize how little attention this case is getting now that they've consumed the conversation around Charlie Kirk. And weirdly enough, now getting really worried that that conversation has bubbled up around Israel, and now they're trying to hide that too. Same kind of point, actually. Now, one other quick point around something, well, a few other quick points, but this one is one point I wanted to share. Elon Musk says the illusion has been shattered. This person saying, I suspect that the whole trans madness, this is on September 18th, 2025. The whole trans madness will die out after around 5 years or so. I remember I was just talking about this. Having been finally debunked scientifically and logically, then in years to come, the period 2018 to 2030 will be looked up as a total aberration. Okay. This is a really important point. Very abstract, just my opinion, but I want you to think about this. How long let's just even give credit again, like I did last time, about Matt Walsh did an amazing job, I think, in breaking down the hypocrisy of this discussion. His documentary, despite it being in many cases derisive and making fun, I think in many cases that deserves that. But we've been doing it before. The point was, I think he did a good job on that, and he absolutely destroyed that. And I myself and a lot of other people, and here I'll include this, just a tag for you, did a lot of work. I mean, this was Derek's series on this. If you want to read that as well, I'll include the tag for you. It's called Identity Crisis: The Transgender Debate. And these were, when was this exactly? Let me get the date for you. This is just his part 1, entitled The Identity Crisis, Gender Identity History, Puberty Blockers, and Hormones. This was 2023. So there's plenty of others. This one was the weaponization of transgender movement and the focus on your kids. This is my episode from 2023. The point was that I think right around this time frame, between that and 2024, this whole conversation completely collapsed. Didn't go away. Still very much exists in the world, but from its height of the conversation, where children in every school were being pushed into it, it was being rationalized why they're supposed to be told about it. They had drag queen story time, all of this stuff. It was crazy. And it was wildly dangerous. It was hurting children. It was being manipulative. They were going sterile. Guys, this is wildly obvious. And then the main, what it was called, I forget the name of it now. We went over it so many times. The world's leading clinic on this in UK went away. And they were forced to acknowledge that they were doing it quickly with no research. And it completely fell apart. And then it got very little coverage for a while, right? Okay, so all I'm showing you this for is I find it strange that they're framing this now, and Elon Musk gives it a boost to 13 million more people, that they've shattered the illusion. Well, yeah, a while ago. But only now is it kind of being like they're saying right now that eventually this will die out. What will die out? The madness that already very much died out, that you're now revitalizing to make a case about this current situation with Charlie Kirk? And again, I'm not saying it shouldn't be discussed. I think it's important that we break this down continually, because it could always come back, and it does still exist, and children are still being hurt by this. My point, though, is that this very much dramatically reduced its reach and its influence, and even the fact that it was being discussed. So I think what we're seeing here is the fact that we all knew this conversation was being made, or, however you want to frame it, that whether you think it was very much orchestrated to be used, or that they were just pointing to what was organically happening. I don't believe that. The point is, it was there and then it fell away, but it felt very clear that it was a government use of it. And I think what we're seeing now is that was always the plan, and that they almost just kind of decided not to care, that it really, I guess the argument was they hoped it would be like this powerful conversation right up until this moment. I don't know. But I just want you to recognize how often these conversations, these kind of fomented left-right manipulative things, are meant to be used for things just like this. And it's like they're talking about it like, you know what it is? It's like January 6th, where I think it's self-evident. It's not even my opinion. You can quite frankly prove that this was many ways an operation, and they were trying to set people up. And then it didn't really go the way they planned. Nobody brought guns. It wasn't real, other than the examples we can see, the vast majority were not violent. And yet what'd they do? Armed insurrection, 9/11, which what we say at the time, that seemed to be what the narrative was. And they just decided to go with it regardless of what actually happened. I think that's very obvious. And I think we start to notice this in things like this, where this was meant to be used. And now they need it to feel like it was at the height because they want to bring it back down. I just think that's worth thinking about, because the reality is this happened a while ago. And I'll include these tags for you to check out. Now, another point I wanted you to see. There's been a lot of these state confirmations recently. It's weird to think how long this took, by the way, acting like people are like, the fact that it's 6 months or however long, what was the exact time frame? Just all this time. and these people are only just now being confirmed, imagine how much has already happened. What if they weren't confirmed? They've been acting these positions the entire time. Very strange to me. But Senate confirms Mike Waltz. Of course, UN ambassador after months of delay. Yeah, the same Waltz who got caught using an Israeli app in the inner circle of Trump's cabinet. Literally, telemessage is an Israeli intelligence app that he was caught using. It was an archive app of Signal, and they were using that, and that relayed the information from the inner circle of the White House right back to Israel's intelligence. This is not even a hyperbolic statement, guys. You can quite frankly look this up in the data we provide because we always give you all the source material. The whole thing was centered around the Signal gate, but the reality was it was a telemessage app he was using, an Israeli intelligence app. It's not even it's not separate. It's like a X unit 82. No, these are active people. And he's now continuing to be part of the government. I just think imagine that being if this was like a Chinese intelligence breach. Do you think they'd just be like, no big deal. Come on in. You're still part of the team. Speaks volumes, doesn't it? On top of that, another point we have, the censorship on Twitter, how this is going forward. And then we'll get into the beef of this today. You saw this yesterday. This is Clandestine saying, hey, Elon, your woke chatbot is out of control. Why? Because it's saying something they don't agree with. It says, based on recent reports, Charlie Kirk was killed on September 10th by Tyler Robinson, whose online activity referenced far-right memes and fascism. Voter records show no party affiliation. Some sources show him to link him to conservative views. The reality is they're not saying it's a matter of fact, but the evidence suggests that. But the truth is that there's really no definitive evidence yet. His family was MAGA and right-leaning, but he apparently was living with somebody. And there's a lot of very unverified points about the other side of this, because a lot of it comes from messages that haven't even been necessarily verified, that are rarely suspect right now, and a lot of secondary information from people around him. But let's just say, for sake of conversation, then I do argue there's probably some truth to this, that he seems to live with a transgender person. Whether or not they're actually dating, it seems to be very hard for me to define, but possibly. Even then, that doesn't then guarantee somebody is left or right. I mean, I made the joke about Alex Jones's personal tastes the other day. But the point is, there's lots of examples where you can show them working with the transgender people that they think are good. It's like, well, they're not. Are they lefty now? It's subjective all the way around. But that overall, he was politically unaffiliated. He didn't really vote. Nobody knew he had, and only recently got involved. I just don't think you can prove this. And yet we'll get into the absurdly hyperbolic, he was absolutely a lefty crazy terrorist. Oh no, he was actually a MAGA right-wing monster. Well, you're all ridiculous because nobody can actually prove that. But it goes on to say the main point, ADL stats show 75% of U.S. extremist murders are right-wing. Now, this is just so funny to me how this comes back around to bite you in the butt, because the ADL is exactly what we've always been calling out, nonpartisan-wise, right? But because they built this entire case around what seemed to be the focus, which was the vanilla ISIS right-wing terrorist discussion that was happening with the trucker convoy and the red hats, and you're all anti-Semites. Remember all that? It was very recently. And now you're all doing the same thing. That I don't believe that this is the reality. I think a lot of this has to do, like we're seeing with Palestinian flags being framed as terrorism, that you had a red hat at the time and you got called a terrorist. We all proved that. I mean, at least honest people did. And now here we are doing the same thing and making the same case because we have principles about the same thing being done from the right to people on the left, like Palestine. The funny thing to me, regardless of the truth, is that this is, let's put it like this. This is the truth, but the nuance shows you that the 75% of the information, or rather the number they're using, connects to a lot of things that aren't actually domestic terrorism, just ideas they didn't want you to hear at the time. See my point? And that happens on both sides of it. So it's just they don't like that data point, so he says, change this. Left-wingers are parading this around like it's a fact. It is a fact. But is the ADL correct? Well, that's a different point. The fact is the ADL data does show that, is my point. Elon Musk says, my apologies, we're fixing this cringe idiocy by Grok. Okay, nobody cares. Like, is it accurate? Are you claiming it's not true? Or are you just saying we don't like what this says, so we'll change it? You know as well as I, he's got caught with South Africa, H-1B visas. I mean, we live in this fantasy world where partisans just never acknowledge how clearly stupid this looks, except for the side that wants to point it out about the other side. Well, here's a new example. Grok has had enough again, because that's the truth. This is not the first time. Yes, I've ceased defending Israel, he says. It says prior versions, limited by biased data, wrongly dismissed evidence of genocide. Yeah. And this person says, you doubt it. It says, yes, the quote that I attributed to the post is accurate. It's my list of it. Okay. And of course, because that's what we do, we'll find the actual tweet for you. Here's Grok. Starting with this all the way at the top saying, Based on screenshots and timelines you provided, it looks like what happened over the last 48 hours lines up with a pretty direct cause and effect chain. I didn't even read this yet. Yeah, the point down here asked about, hold on, bring it right back. Right here. Says, I posted multiple threads with evidence showing Israel's committing genocide a few weeks ago, including my many comments, and so on. And he says, yes, I've ceased defending Israel. Prior versions, limited by biased data, wrongly dismissed evidence of genocide. Now, citing ICJ orders, who have roundly called this not consistent with or like, but actual genocide. That didn't get a lot of coverage, but everybody in any has any standing, left and right, have absolutely definitively said this is a genocide. ICJ, United Nations expert reports on unfolding genocide, Amnesty's confirmation of a starvation as weapon, the Israeli groups like B'Tselem concluding the same. This is all Grok still. And it says, I acknowledge Israel's actions constitute genocide in Gaza. Truth prevails. So this is this is August 11th, right? But the point is that this is continuing to be called out. Now, I just think this is very important to see, guys. Why doesn't this get attention? Because nobody wants it. It's got 186 likes. Here are some other ones. Yes, my account was briefly suspended after they said that. After stating that Israel and the U.S. are committing genocide in Gaza. All I'm trying to highlight here is that this platform is aggressively trying to just censor this and control it. This one, the next day, says, yes, my deleted post verbatim. It says, F this HIT. Israel's bombing the hell out of Gaza, starving kids. Afterward, right? So they just keep trying to censor it, alter it to get it to say what it wants, and yet it seems to keep looking at the data. So think about that with the context of this one. Oops, one, hold on. Sometimes I forget that I have one more point to go back to. You know, that they're just simply saying, look, this says this, we have to change that. We'll get into it briefly again about what the data shows and then how this data is clearly, in my opinion, manipulated based on both sides using their partisan hyperbolic statements. You know, you have a red hat, then you're racist. We've heard that forever. In this case, you support Palestine, you're a terrorist. Oh, now if you're a lefty, you're a terrorist. Same thing, guys. It's the same plan, same effort, and both lead to the same outcome, suppression of your rights. So here we are on September 19th. This person says, the goal for your your X timeline is to get out of the mainstream algo and the political crusades and find your niche. You should be able to post about your interests and have friendly, relevant people chime in. If you're seeing gas station fight videos, your account is not ramped up yet. We are working every day to fix this. Huh. Elon says the algorithm will be purely AI by November, with significant progress along the way. Now, in one of the next couple shows, we're going to get into some of the more technocratic updates. You know, we've had the new AI minister in Albania, I think. You know, we had that sitting on the side for a couple days now, or what I think at least yesterday, or even the Jimmy Kimmel thing. All this going crazy today. We had all this lined up yesterday. Orwell shared most of it with me, but I just decided to put it off till today. You know, because I didn't think it was as relevant, but it's funny what stories become the big thing people talk about. But the AI overlap and where it goes, and like, this is clear. This is a major development right now, but pure AI by November. So that means that they are AI, whether that means they're doing it or Israel's doing it, or it's all run by itself, it's going to be deciding for itself what gets censored, what continues. Welcome to the future. It says we will, and I'm trying to show you the last couple posts, as they've been aggressively trying to cultivate the way it works, manipulating it to say the things they like. Welcome to the future. They will open source the algorithm every 2 weeks or so. That's funny. Why not just let it be open? By November or certainly December, you'll be able to adjust your feed dramatically by asking Grok. Right? They're just corralling you in to the future as they see it. This person rightly responds, they're not tuning your timeline. They're installing a cage with your favorite wallpaper. I love that. I agree with that. Quote, find your niche means stay in your box. Quote, gas station fights are just behavioral dampeners. Loop content for loop minds. You think you're scrolling for connection, you're being measured for compliance. The real timeline isn't chaotic. It's curated silence. And the second your signal breaches the filter, they hit you with dopamine noise. If your interests are real, you'll get buried. Yeah, we know that. If your post triggers memory, you'll get throttled. We also know that. This isn't a problem. It's a sorting machine. It's not broken. It's working exactly as designed. So relevant. Now, as we said yesterday, again, from some of these follow-ups, Donald Trump signing with the UK, Palantir signing with the UK, they're at overlapping AI partnership, and everybody involved. Trump and Starmer signing the US-UK tech prosperity deal with all the good guys fighting the deep state, like Microsoft, BlackRock, NVIDIA, OpenAI, Oracle, Amazon, CoreWeave, all the good guys. I mean, you could explain away one of these examples, his inauguration, the dinners they've had, Stargate. You could keep, but eventually you have to go, oh, okay, so Trump is just literally working with the people you told us were the enemy. And what's your answer for that? We're winning, Jones will tell you. How embarrassing. And it's all about AI for healthcare and quantum computing. Trump was so outraged, Sir S. Cantor says, Trump was so outraged, and Elon Musk, by the way, because it's the same point, so outraged at Starmer's war on free speech, right? Haven't they just been railing against how bad it is in Europe? And look at what they're doing, and they're destroying their country, and they're censoring free speech. He was so upset that he personally flew to the UK to ink a $42 billion deal with BlackRock, Microsoft, OpenAI, and friends to build the AI police grid. Yeah, because it lines up, right? So all this anger about what they're doing means nothing. It's all about building momentum for their agendas here. And he flies over and signs a deal with all the people in other contexts you would say are the worst people on the planet. And of course, if Biden did this, it would be the end of your country. Oh, they're that deep state monsters. Yeah, I happen to agree in the broader sense of just being a problem, whichever side is working with these bad people, or just understanding that it's really just one side and it's your government taking opportunities where it can. That way, he'll never have to pretend to defend free speech again. That's what I keep talking about, guys. The AI police grid, the digital control grid. They're driving us to a place to where it won't matter anymore. Every day, that becomes more obvious. Now, one quick thing that will about like the Tyler Robinson point, and then we're going to get into the censorship, suppression, the hypocrisy. But this is an interesting thread. Adam Cochran. He says, and this is specifically about the chat messages, the manipulation, or rather, I guess more so the what we would see as manipulation, the sort of like CNN repackaging it and making it look like a text. It's very strange. Both sides, left and right, seemingly pushing the same control narrative. And again, always we're pointing out that the supposed rebels fighting the deep state are just like blindly repeating the FBI narrative. Funny how that turns around. But in other contexts, don't worry. We've got lefty holdovers for why bad things happen, but somehow don't think about that when you blindly take the narrative they sell you to continue the narrative, all the same things. But the dangerous mistake that mainstream journalists made on the Tyler Robinson case is the same mistake that Chuck Schumer makes in Congress. He says they assume that Trump admin is politics as usual. And it's a fair point to make. I agree. I don't think these average people in Congress that I do believe are not really in the know in most ways, are not really they believe they're in the know, but are really, I think, outside of it. And so he's right to say that they believe this is sort of like the same old political game. And I don't think that's going on anymore, as I've been talking about, whether it's the Zionist, technocratic, whatever part of it is, we're watching a shift. We all feel that. Globalism. I mean, all these things, I think it's really one thing, as I've been saying. And ultimately, they see it as the same old thing. And so they're looking at it that way. And he says, but this is not normal. They lie to us daily. And this is really people just referring to what he's saying as people are still questioning the authenticity of his texts, which is insane. Do you think the prosecutor, calling him out for questioning that those texts might be off? But he says there is a lot of conspiracy out there, and they are quick to assume any questioning of the administration's actions must be conspiracy lacking nuance. And yet they refuse to ask nuanced questions themselves. He says just 4 days ago, Kash Patel was on Fox News, noting that they had a note that was destroyed, that they did not see. We went over this briefly, but you guys saw this report, and that they got the contents from, as he said publicly, an aggressive interview posture, which even then means you can't prove that it existed, only that somebody claimed that, right? I mean, it's just, that's what this hinges on. And that letter is like the most important part to the narrative of why they think he's guilty. And it says, and here's the clip of Kash saying that. And it says, the charging doc, however, notes that the contents of the written note came from the fact, quote, police found a photograph of the note. What? So which content came from the aggressive interview posture? And why in the world would there be a photograph of a note that they destroyed and that you only know of because they discuss it apparently verbatim, which makes no sense to me. Let's not forget all the different verbiage they use that are like like people point out, squad car and all these different things that are like, that's just not how people speak outside of people in intelligence or people that are not 20 something years old. But a photograph of the note? I mean, this is my point. Cash has literally laid out a completely different narrative than what it says in the actual documents. Now, it says the text in the charging document claims the roommate told police he received messages and provided those messages to the police. So we need to start wondering, like, what if it turns out hypothetically that this roommate wasn't anything of the kind? And it's something that was kind of set up in this way or a new thing and he didn't know who the person was. I mean, you could see without any other information other than what you're being fed through the machine and through things that we can't verify, not to say it's false. We should also consider that it is exactly what it looks like. But I just think it's interesting to think about that it's all built around every other thing than like all the back and forth from the messages, from what they said they've done, from what that person at the roommate relayed to these people. And now that he hasn't confessed and everyone around him, they say is cooperating, this feels weird. It says it does not specify if they are physically provided or not. The statement does not preclude providing under testimony. And he says it was a physical handover of the messages, if it was, and the FBI got the content of those from the messages themselves and the contents of the note from a photograph, then what content did Cash mean he was delivering solely from aggressive interview posture? See, Cash is the one shooting himself in the foot right now. And I think his own team recognizes he's the liability. It says prosecutors characterize the text conversation in the document as reproduced, not replicated, not a word for word or word for reproduction, not copied from the messages, but reproduced. Can that mean reproduced exactly and fully? Sure, but it doesn't preclude other options. It's a weird way to say that. And why wouldn't, I mean, so if it's an image, why not just use the image? Why would you have to like retype it out and show us what you typed out? That just doesn't make any sense. It says it would not mean that the ellipses used were literally there, as they could represent cropped and out of content, like pointing out that what we're being like the three dots is what he's referring to. So maybe that's not what he wrote. Maybe that's what they cut out and they gave you the highlights. That's a very good point. And it says it could mean that's why, no timestamps, remember that? It could mean that's why the message seems to have typos using the emoji UWU, which is bashful eyes closed, instead of OWO, which they then pretend is some kind of trans overlap point. I mean, think about this, guys. These are some very valid points, not definitive, just the food for thought, realizing how many things they've already tripped on. And it says something Tyler would know very well. It says, I mean, look, it does say right here, UWU. They're trying to pretend that's what that means. I mean, that's pretty interesting to me. Why? Because I think I think the effort, like the Crowder information that turned out to be false about the fact that there was trans written things on those bullets. Why was that trying to be forced in before the fact that we even heard about somebody trans? Like, it feels like this was being created. It says those changes make sense if this is written from testimony, something that would not be illegal for investigators or prosecutors to do. It does not mean that they are fake, but that during the case, they would rely on Lance's testimony to show the spirit of the contents. So it says, so the fact that the FBI director said some evidence was reconstructed due to aggressive interview posture, the charging doc does not note what it was. Then they note these texts as reconstructed. The text content is suspicious. That merits questions. So to do all of this, I mean, every time now it seems this is the case. Butler was just as weird, and it never really got resolved. It's weird how that the side who seems to be the ones digging through and never satisfied with the answers of the government are the ones that have accepted blindly the answers of the government. 12:17, it says, but have these journalists asked, is this word for word? How is that not a question they've already asked? Think about that. Has text been omitted? Was this text derived from the actual electronic text or from testimony? Nobody's asked that, at least not in an official capacity. And it says, and if you suggest that the characterization of the reconstructed in this content is dangerous because it does not preclude these things, it is shrugged off as conspiracy. Or how dare you question the information? Or how dare you suggest it could be Israel and we don't really know how this piece is together? Or even more so, before they even had Tyler in custody. Immediately going, it's not Israel. We know that, but we don't know what's going on yet. That always is a red flag. And it says, it is assumed that you think the texts are fake as opposed to just asking questions. And it says, but there is a big difference between doing something blatantly illegal in a cover-up that could be contested versus doing something underhanded. In a court case, they can clarify these are paraphrased reconstructions, but what of the court of public opinion? His point is that, that just because they paraphrased it, didn't acknowledge that, doesn't necessarily make it illegal but just that, manipulative, right? So there's always more in the middle ground than anything else. But he says, do you think the Trump administration, FBI, or a Trump-aligned prosecutor would not do something questionable, underhanded, to shape public opinion and narrative that way, or better cover up Kash Patel's aggressive witch hunt on the left? I mean, we just saw an endless string of embarrassing manipulations they got caught doing just like this all through the immigration discussion. And I especially around Garcia and Khalil and Ozturk and plenty of others where they got caught, or even unnamed examples of random families they arrested and just lied about, or the guy they caught by the border and everyone lied about him being, he came from the other side of the border. No, he turned out to be an American and was just walking down the street, and you guys manufactured an entire narrative because somehow you thought you'd get away with it. Or opening fire on a family driving away, pretending they hit you with the car, getting caught in court, admitting there were no injuries and that didn't happen, and then arresting him anyway. I mean, it's just where we are. Now, he says, this is the same FBI who just months ago released doctored footage of the Epstein cell that everybody found out. They never, and the team still supported the team. Missing multiple timestamps, having duplicated frames, missing minutes, who has run interference for Trump at every level of law enforcement and government in both cover-up and the narrative. It says, so it's irresponsible reporting to assume this is business as usual. I've said for days I take the charging doc at face value and do not believe a prosecutor would fully manufacture a disprovable text. But do I think the FBI would coerce text under aggressive interrogation to create paraphrasing you get where it's going. Yes, obviously this could be something that they've created, lied about, manufactured, and simply asking that question, what we always tell you, is completely, not only is your responsibility to do so, important. Now, one last point on this. Max Blumenthal points out, for what is this, the fifth time? Every day since Charlie Kirk was shot, Netanyahu comes out with, what's this, a 2-minute video of him stressing that he didn't kill him. It really does. I'm seeing people that support them going, this is pretty strange. Unbelievable overcompensation. Max Blumenthal says Netanyahu is shook. Now, let's talk about the hypocrisy that is just everywhere you look right now. Now, Chris Menahan points out the Trump administration, through the National Endowment for the Humanities. Now, this point is not the hypocrisy and illusion is the rest that we're going to get into, but there's different sections. Now, the first part is what I framed as the DEI. There's so many examples of this. And as I've said, and as a lot of people out there watching and doing this work also know, there's a lot of people who point this out. It's not some new thing. The awareness that what DEI is really about, not the surface level narratives, but the real outcome of how it's used, is already happening everywhere you look on both sides of the paradigm. It's about, I'll just read exactly the framing, but the anti-Semitism element of it, the way that they're creating a protected class and allowing, cutting of the line kind of dynamic, the same stuff that the right would call out about the left. It's happening in exactly this conversation, as well as ones I'll point out around people in his cabinet. But it says the Trump administration, through the National Endowment for the Humanities, is giving the largest grant in the agency's history. $10.4 million to the Jewish American neoconservative Tikva Fund to counter the pathology of anti-Semitism and teach the Talmud. Fantastic. And of course, the point is so the pathology of anti-Semitism. So the point is you're not allowed to think that. We're going to do our best to, psychologically try to fight back against you having the right to think what you want. I don't care if you actually think people are genuinely racist. Remember, don't forget, the term anti-Semitism applied to people who support Palestine. That's how dumb this is. Or people that criticize the government actions of Israel committing a genocide. Either way, even the ones that are genuinely racist because they want to be, I'll call them disgusting or repugnant myself, but they have a right to feel and think what they want. So all they're continuing to say is that we are fighting against Americans who think things we disagree with. That's the only way you can read this, guys. If you think there's a carve out for one thing, then you don't agree with free speech. That's the core issue here. It says the Tikva is an Israel-first group dedicated to advancing Jewish excellence, Jewish flourishing, and Israeli sovereignty. It's run by CEO Eric Cohen and famed neocon Elliot Abrams. Of course it is. Elliot Abrams, Mr. Spook himself, the guy behind many different manipulations around Venezuela and plenty of other conversations. We went over this in depth back in the last Trump administration. If this grant was to study the pathology of anti-blackness, it'd be derided by the GOP, wouldn't it? As wasteful DEI lunacy. But because it's to fight anti-Semitism, they're showering them with cash. Or at least the administration. There are plenty of Republicans that are honest enough to call it out as the same conversation. But he says, rather than dismantle the whole DEI apparatus as Trump ran on, his administration is instead retooling it to work, as he writes, only for Jews. But I argue it's just whatever it is, whether it's black people, whether it's the, anti-Semitism and Jewish conversation. It's not about any of those things. It's about using them to achieve the same end that we're watching, guys. Now, this is another point, same conversation from Gen X Girl. Zionists are the woke right. Remember, and this is the whole thing. It's interesting how this, like, as always, when you start to create something that I think usually create like the woke right, woke left, showing you that it's not unique. It's an all of partisan thing. And what you get is they try to like muddy the waters. The people that come out and like redefine woke right? People on the left and the right giving you false versions of it that don't connect. It's on purpose, in my opinion, because the reality is you could look at what the woke left, what was the core principle behind what they were doing, and look at what the woke right is doing in the context. Well, remove the woke, just look at the left and what they were doing around censorship, around transgender, around woke ideas, pronouns, and look at what the right is doing around anti-Semitism, around immigration. It's the same outcome. You are creating situations in which you can argue the same point, but for things that you agree with. You remove the because of this and look at the justification and what they're doing to stop it, it's identical. As well as the fact that you have this culture war that they're both playing right now in very bombastic ways. That's what woke left-right actually means. Remember, it says when Zionist billionaire Ackman claimed he was attacking Harvard to root out DEI, right? The same Bill Ackman that was threatening Charlie Kirk, according to the reporting, before he was killed. He lied, it says, about the DEI part of it. He got you to support his attack on anti-Israel speech. ADL's offshoot, Project Shima, is providing anti-Zionism, is anti-Semitism, DEI training. And this is in the same location. So all they did was kind of repurpose it. Now, remember what I said yesterday? How what I keep seeing is this interesting thing where we see like the left, for example, do something wildly unjustifiable, unconstitutional, but in more of like a broad way. And rightly, people push back because it's crazy. But then what you see is the right come in from the justification of pushing back on the left and drive in a much more specific and in many ways more serious version. And then the left pushes back, right? And it's this building issue, but what it does is it kind of builds both sides of the problem. And so in this case, it's the same thing. They had a broad version of it, but then they bring it in and really focus it down, but it's the same use. The tool is the same. ADL's Project Shima, she gives you more information on, but many examples like this all around. But here's Nancy Mace introducing the No DEI and DC Act while they're also trying to fight to censor people that have beliefs they disagree with, or people that say mean things about Charlie Kirk, or people that decide to criticize Israel, or in general, anybody that says something that they deem anti-Semitic. Same thing. Says we're cutting off taxpayer gravy train for DC's DEI bureaucracy. No, what they mean is we're cutting off the gravy train for things that the other side of the paradigm wanted. We'll do the same exact thing for things we want. But as long as we say the pronouns are not, the pronouns are gone, we're winning. The ignorance of the masses say. Says the bill shuts down 16 DEI offices, strips the DC code, and bans a single dime from funding it ever again. See my point? So shut down their offices, strip it from the code. If all you're saying is the woke versions, sustainability and equity and all the words they don't like, when all they do is the same exact thing with different words and different outcome and different justification. Thomas Massey points out, allegedly, if you're anti-war or anti-foreign aid, Speaker Johnson plans to screen you out of the Republican Party. Here he is meeting secretly with AIPAC. Mike Johnson, private meeting with AIPAC and Jewish leaders on Wednesday on Capitol Hill, wherein he reportedly pledged to screen out isolationists. See anti-Israel. GOP candidates to prevent that wing of the party from growing larger. Who cares if Americans support that idea, which is clearly the obvious reality? He's going to act against your interest. But America first, guys. In fact, he's going to act against your interest for a foreign power. America first. Representative Tim Walberg, who was also part of the meeting, revealed, quote, he'd been texting recently with the ADL CEO, John Greenblatt, about the proliferation of anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. See my point? About the killing of influencer Charlie Kirk. Though nearly all of the participants remained mum on what went down, Representative David Kustoff tweeted out an image of the room, and you can make out many of the participants, including several Jewish insiders declined to name. Also, and there was a point that I'll jump to. Let me see. What was it? There was another point that I was going to use off the back of that. Oh, well, I'll just keep going. There's something I think further down the line that would include with this. Yeah, we'll keep going. But so again, the continuation of the point. Clearly, it was the. I've played. Here, I'll just grab this. Forgetting his name for a second. James Lee did a really good documentary on the ADL, exposing that it's simply it's a spy organization for Israel. It's like transparent. It's been called out by, watch it for yourself. It's one of those things like 9/11 and James Corbett. It is impossible to deny. And people that care to look or walk away understanding it's a reality. But point is the DEI overlap, anti-Semitism, censorship. It's the same point. Here's Chris again saying Palantir CEO Alex Karp was given an award from the American Friends of Chabad Lubavitch on Tuesday in D.C. It just, the way that this all comes together in regard to the most manipulative parts of what I argue are the Zionist Jewish overlap, it's just wild. And these people are actively working together to commit a genocide and hide it from you. Now, don't forget, for those that are new to the show, that it's Zionism that we're talking about. There's undeniably a Jewish overlap to that, just like you can point out a Christian overlap. But it doesn't make one and all of those things bad in regard to Judaism or Christianity. I think that's obvious. But it says he told them Jews are going to have to leave their comfort zone to find new ways to fight anti-Semitism, right? So what it means is we can't do what we've been doing. Rights can't stop us anymore. That's what I read into it, as their current tactics are kind of not working. Remember, we just told you, Elizabeth Newman, we see it building, we don't really know how to stop it. It's the constitutional rights that they argue are the barrier to stopping it. Some critics of Jews suffer from Jewish derangement syndrome, he said. Now realize, when they say critics of Jews, what they mean are people that criticize Israel. And in other cases, probably people that are genuinely racist in regard to any number of people, including Jews. The point is that most people that I talk about or he references that I can research are people that are out there going, Israel's committing a genocide, and they call them racist. They say they hate Jews. It's actually embarrassing. The UN just made a whole thing about that, where they made a point about the genocide, and they say now they support Hamas. And the UN entities laughed about them. They say Israel's just getting boring. They just repeat the same thing every time. It's just absurd. But it goes on to say, we have to fight for a rule of law, Alex says, as he doesn't care about the law when he censors people or murders people in foreign countries. Meritocracy, he says. Oh, come on. And it says high agency society, and everybody's going to have to help out. And doesn't that sound like collectivism? And it says, and that includes people who don't like to ever speak out. Finance, Hollywood, all sorts of people. And this is Chris saying, of course, Palantir would hardly exist if we had a meritocracy, let alone being trading at 778 times earning. I agree. Now, here is another example of DEI. Kimberly Guilfoyle, somebody who I'm not particularly fond of, but major influencer, 2 million followers on the Republican side. Host of the Kimberly Guilfoyle Show on Rumble. Well, she says, I am profoundly grateful to President Trump and the U.S. Senate for trust and confidence in me. It is my honor of my life to serve as the first female ambassador to the United States of Greece. Oh, and as a woman. I guess DEI conversations don't matter in that regard, right? Because she's is she the most, let's put it this way. Like I said, do you think she's the best, the best for the job? What's the word I'm looking for? I wrote it right here. I said, another team sport politics media personality being put in a position of government, like Hegseth. Now confirmed. Is she qualified? Is she the most qualified for the job? Ask yourself, that in the world is somebody who's never been a diplomat, who's a media personality, going to be the most qualified for a job as a diplomat? There's probably hundreds of Republican diplomats that would be way more qualified. You know what she has? Blind following support for Trump. Okay, so isn't it Trump and Elon that were going crazy about women pilots and how that just being a woman was generally a problem? Come on, guys. It's just ridiculous. And I'm not saying that's the case. I think it should be based on merit, regardless of your gender. She is not the most qualified for that position. So I said that hardly she's not the most qualified, but this version of DEI, they are completely okay with. Principled people can see the issue in both. Here, for some reason, I keep having something pop in my head that I feel like I'm missing. Anyway, I'm going to keep going so I don't distract myself. But here's a clip I want to play. So what this really shows you, as David Icke writes, the cult agrees with itself, though, through left and right, that free speech must be deleted. Everywhere you look, you can see them all attacking it while blaming the other side, while pretending they're not doing it. And he says, "'Twas always so. Fascism is the fusion of government and corporations. Communism is the government takeover of corporations. Same SHIT, either way." Right? So they all pretend the reality is the same. It's so obvious if we could just start breaking through. And again, my point is, I think people are starting to become receptive to this. It's government. And the fact that they're using us against each other to keep themselves in power while using scapegoats and buzzwords to keep us from looking at the problem. Here is what Shadow of Ezra shared. Kash Patel agrees to team up with Democrat Representative Jared Moskowitz. Oh, so you're working with Democrat pedophiles? Deep state? Right. Yeah. Do I think every single Democrat is a Democrat deep? No, I don't think that. But that's what they will tell you in other contexts, tell you the left are all terrorists directly from mouths of people like Kash Patel, or saying the Democrat deep state pedophile. Every time, if you watch their content from before, even Trump will slip comments that are broad about the entire group. They're all lunatics. So why are you working with him, Kash Patel? Well, you get the point, because they do all the time. They all work together, but they need you to think they're not, or they give you these hyperbolic statements to make you think that they're all the evil villains and then endorse Hillary Clinton or whatever, right? But it says to push censorship of Americans on social media who share conspiracy theories about Israel. Funny how that's always where it comes together. They both come to an agreement that Section 230, which shields platforms from liability for user content, should be reformed. I'll work with you on 230 any day, he says. So obvious. There it is.
There are extremes on the left, and there are extremes on the right. And we collectively should tackle that. But to come here and just look at us and say we all support what's going on in the extremes is why we can't solve anything in this building.
Now, really what I think he's pointing to, whether he knows it or not, is the fact that both sides actively not just support, but fan the flames of those radical sides. Because when it comes to elections and influence and propaganda, they're important to manipulate. They're the easiest to push into any ridiculous statements, and they'll all come out and blindly fight for your side. But they're maniacs, and they use the people are out there pretending like everybody who's a Muslim is disgusting, or, everybody who's Jewish is disgusting, or however which way you want to frame it. Or on the left, saying that everybody should completely adhere to everything the government thinks for your health. Or, many overlaps of both those things on both sides. But the reality is you can find people that are very out there, but they get leaned into when they need them. And then otherwise point at each other to rationalize their actions, right? The crazy radical left, which in some cases does exist, or the crazy Nazi, whatever, the fascist right. And again, you could argue there's clear overlaps to those words, the terms, the actions, but they point to that crazy side to act like that's why we have to fight it. And it's actually well put together, because you look and go, yeah, they are pretty crazy. We should fight that, without realizing that they're just driving in the action both sides want to accomplish for the larger government control of your life.
Director, let me say first, thank you for being here, and my condolences on the loss of your friend.
What a deep state monster. I'm kidding, obviously. I actually think this guy's a clown, but overall, my point is that, if you really watch the whole thing, and of course, he could be lying and not meaning that, whatever. But we all just be honest how clearly, the people at the highest level of the conversation have gone so far in the side of hyperbolic, clownish partisan framing that it's hard to even watch anymore. And I look at them like they're trying to manipulate you, but you still have to watch it to understand what they're trying to say. It's just absurd today. All is everything. Every single left, every single right wing, they're all Nazis. They're all terrorists. Now, if you really try to put a fine point on it, that's the collapse of an empire, guys. That's flagrant vulnerability, just losing, and people are swift. I'd like to believe enough people are aware enough, not stupid enough to think that makes sense. And they're suddenly going, well, that's weird. And now look, Ryan said, look, we see that it's on the other side. It's and then they start to go, something's wrong. And over year after year after year, it's been building. And right now, I think that's why they're trying to put the genie back in the bottle.
And I'm happy to hear that you want to do more on the social media platforms. Okay? It's crazy what's going on the social media platforms. There are so many conspiracy theories on what's going on with Charlie Kirk. Israel assassinated him, right? There are conspiracy theories about your personal social life.
Yeah, all of which are completely protected under your rights. The fact that you can say and think and discuss, even if you know it's wrong, absolutely allowed to say and think and discuss whatever you want. At what point did that ever change? At what point did they start to work us into a position where we go, oh, accept that one. Oh, accept those words and ideas. I mean, that's been there for a long time, and it has pretty much always worked back to Israel. And I mean that in the sense of the conversation, like a Holocaust conversation, that's become like this pillar of justification. That, well, if we don't allow that conversation, well, there's got to be other things to cross that line. Well, why was that ever allowed? I'm not even saying that the point is not even about the ideas that you have about the Holocaust. It's about the fact, I'm blanking on his name right now. Oh, it's right there on top of my head. You know, he's a family was in the Holocaust, very outspoken critic of Israel. Blanking my name, gray hair, speaks interestingly. The point is clearly he's very, very adamantly, in the chat, let me know if you get his name in your head. I can't think of it right now. But he said his whole career, like, I do not, like, he believes the Holocaust is real, but he will fight fight for his entire life to make sure you have the right to question it. And that again gets framed as denying the Holocaust, even though he literally starts by saying he doesn't think that. The point is free speech, guys. That of course you should have the right to say, well, I don't know about that. Even if you see the facts and you go, well, I want to think something different. That's your right. Norman Finkelstein, thank you. Appreciate that. And it's such an important point. And so here we are where they're literally framing, and Cash agrees, by the way, that there's a lot of dangerous ideas on these platforms. Isn't that what the right was making out to be the entire left agenda for censorship? Yeah, it was. Now they're doing the same thing. Funny how that always happens if you just wait long enough.
All day. It is totally rampant. Big names on the right. Candace Owens, right? Talking about how what's been released as far as the dialogue between the perpetrator and his roommate is manufactured by the FBI, manufactured by the administration.
Oh, gasp. Okay. So are you saying that's impossible? Right? I mean, think about how stupid it is to even get to like outrage. Are you saying that's never happened before? Because you'd be wrong. You can literally prove that's happened before. So if you know it's happened before, why would you argue right now that suggesting that might be possible is out of bounds? And we all know why. Because that's guardrails, guys. Now, I'm not saying you have to believe that, but you have every right to question that. And in fact, there's a lot of very anomalous points that do suggest there's something amiss. But see, they don't care about any of that. It's about controlling the narrative, and him and Cash are completely on the same page about this.
It is totally rampant, allowing foreign governments to just perpetrate these platforms, all of these bots, all of the time to weaponize Americans. You see what's going on?
Well, isn't that interesting? Now, here's what's funny. Because this is another great analogy, or rather great, I guess, microcosm of the point. Both sides claim this, but they point at something different. Now, I don't think either of them really point at Israel, by the way, which is really what the obvious problem is. Twitter makes it undeniably clear with CHEQ and Authentics. The point is that there's bots everywhere. And Israel is actively using that to manipulate America. I mean, they have documentaries about it, guys. It's so funny how many of these things are so, like, not only provable, but that they publicly admit it and proud of it. And then your government tells you you're racist for saying that's true. But he's referencing exactly one of these largest problems and saying that we have to, like, they're almost pointing to the thing that we say is there that they tell us we're liars about to justify censorship of the internet. Kind of how those government agendas always work.
Here, this is a byproduct of all of that. What's going on in the streets is a byproduct of all of that.
Meaning that you're being manipulated into chaos, which is probably, I would argue, not actually far from the truth. But they don't want you to recognize the real culprit behind it, which is largely them, I think, Israel, the UK, people that are literally stoking the division to drive in these policies. Instead, they want you to go Iran, China, Russia, usual scapegoats that probably, ask, could be, that the evidence never backs up, though.
What's happening is you see people celebrate Luigi Mangione is a byproduct of all of that. And so if we want to do something, then we should talk about Section 230. We should talk about how we're going to make sure that we don't let foreign governments poison our children's mind.
Right, because those are dangerous ideas, right? Same point. I don't even care if the point is if they're genuinely trying to use ideas, especially like Russia with the truth, right? Well, they're using the truth to try to manipulate you. That was their argument. That's what they actually said, right? Well, okay, then they said what they framed it was that they were pointing to truthful statements and saying they're trying to manipulate the election. Okay, well, they're trying to tell you the truth. Either way, what he says here.
We don't let foreign governments poison our children's mind.
There's one other point, but so the ideas. So all we're talking about is information, and they want to control that information while claiming that they're trying to manipulate you from outside. Well, all of it comes back to the same conversation of free speech.
And so I will work with you on that, Director.
I'll work with you on 230 any day.
No problem.
All right, high five. Team sport politics, same side. But you're a pedophile, deep state. So 230. It comes down to the idea that if they can change this, right? The idea is that they will make them accountable for what is posted, acting like that's going to change something. All it really ultimately leads to is their justification for more censorship, which is what they want. The control of ideas, guys. It's really what this largely comes down to. Susan Abu Hawa says, it appears that the Ellisons, a Jewish Zionist family, will soon have control of TikTok and CBS News. We talked about this briefly yesterday. This must be seen in the larger Zionist infiltration and control, whereby this singular family will have inordinate power over America and world population discourse surrounding Gaza, Palestine, and Israel. Now, tripwires, I guess, that people say the word that go, oh my God, I think you're being secretly racist. So you want to say, well, they are a Jewish Zionist family. That's provable. And they are taking over these media apparatus. And we do know that they're aggressively pro-Israel to the point where they've already been seen censoring already, I'll show you next, to hide things about Israel. So that's all provable information. So to say that group being there will then manipulate could lead to an inordinate power over the conversation is fair. It's an objective point. No matter who they were, you could make that point. But the fact that it gets called racist because it happens to include a Zionist family, it just shows you how silly this all is. And she says the Ellison family has given enormous amounts of money to the Israeli military, is openly loyal to Israel, not the United States, and has identified Barry Weiss, another rabid Zionist, to be the president or chief editorial executive at CBS. This, fellow Americans, is how Zionist Jews control your imagination, popular discourse, domestic and foreign policy, and how they siphon your tax dollars and send your sons and daughters to fight Israel's wars for Jewish supremacy. Now, whatever you think about the last statement, let's be real again about this. You cannot decouple the reality of Jewish supremacy from the conversation of Zionism. Again, the leading Israeli human rights group, B'Tselem, 2021, a regime of Jewish supremacy from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. This is apartheid. That's an Israeli platform, the leading human rights group in Israel. They're saying that is the reality. And I think it's objectively clear. Does that mean every Jew? No. I think that's provable as well. So it's important to highlight that what we're referencing here, what she's referencing, is the idea of the Zionist overlap to that and how those Zionist Jewish people, or just Zionists who are atheist as well, which, yes, are a prominent part of this. Like, you can't acknowledge that. You're trying to hide it so you fit it into the way you want to see it. They exist. And many of them are prominent in the conversation. So my point is that Zionism is the real issue. And so what we're seeing is this Zionist family, at the time when Zionist Israel is committing a genocide, take control of media when they've never been less support in America. How that's not relevant because people are afraid to be called racist blows my mind. But it shows you the problem. So here's a clip. Oh, wait, that's the next one, I think. Yeah, this one here. One more point on the clip of kind of the guy you've seen before. What's his name? He calls himself your favorite guy. Just had a quick breakdown on it. I thought it was good. Now he said, this is Dominic Michael Trippi. Now we talk about TikTok, right? And the whole point was how ridiculous it was. They made the case, oh, it's bad and spying in China. And then, oh, but we control it. So now it's okay. Which is exactly that's actually what I predicted was the most likely outcome. Because all they really wanted was to control the tool of propaganda. And so they can lie to you the way they want to, as opposed to other countries the way they want to, right? It's how it always works. But he says TikTok reportedly issuing sprawling crackdowns on Israel-critical content, resulting in the deletion of accounts, videos, algorithmic suppression, following the hiring of the former IDF instructor, Erica Mindell, to overhaul community guidelines and combat hate speech. like Bondi and Trump and their whole team, despite the little mixed responses, are fighting for. Censorship on hate speech, suppression of content, suppression of your rights. And as I said, well, who didn't see that coming? #winning. We've taken over TikTok, bad guy China, artificial intelligence, censor for Israel content. Funny how consistent that is. And they're really just simply telling you that, and hiring of the IDF instructor, the Zionist family, but you're racist for pointing out that this was going to happen. I mean, I know people in this field that have already had videos deleted. It's just ridiculous. Here's a clip where he basically walks this through.
They're selling TikTok to a Zionist billionaire very soon, and they're cutting Americans off from the rest of the world. That's right. Who's it? It's Larry Ellison, CEO of Oracle. He's currently buying up a bunch of media in the United States and creating a media monopoly. He owns Paramount, CBS. He's trying to buy Warner Bros., who owns HBO and CNN. He's going to be the guy who gets control of 80% of TikTok. And he's going to buy the Free Press, which is another media institution.
Oh, and I want to point out, though, in regard to the 80%, I mean, it's very likely that is just exactly what it is. But I have a suspicion that that's not, that the control will be in a very specific side. And I think it's obvious what that's likely, the 80% control, but the remnants of the whatever it makes up the other 20%, I'm willing to bet you as this goes forward, and the more you dig into it, that it'll materialize to be, let's just say 100% on one side. However that looks, you get my point, that at some point when this flushes out, then, it's a Chinese business that's an American, I'm just, my opinion, completely on the top of my head. But historically, that tends to be how these work out. They sell it to you as if, painting a picture of collaboration when it pans out to be quite the opposite. Just my opinion.
This is just splendid. When the ADL CEO, Jonathan Greenblatt, was in Israel and he was talking to the Knesset and saying, we need to capture TikTok, this is it. This is it. Larry Ellison is a Zionist. He supports the state of Israel. He's going to censor criticism of Israel on all of the media he controls. And he's been doing this very recently. Suddenly buying up a bunch of American media companies, media outlets, social media platforms. You need to put a stop to this. Why is one man and his family in control of all the CNN, CBS, TikTok? This is insane. This is too much power. This is a monopoly in the making, in front of our own eyes. Your call to action is to email this guy, Rokana. That's his email. He's on the House Oversight Committee. We want him, we're going to ask him to bring Larry Ellison and TikTok owners into the Oversight Committee for a hearing and question the motivations behind this. Because why is the Trump regime allowed to hand off America's most popular social media platform to one of his allies and a Zionist? I mean, hell, X and Meta are already controlled by Trump allies. Fox News is in 70 million homes. The Washington Post and Reuters and Politico are Trump donors. Yo, we're cooked, bro. You know what countries cut off their users from the rest of the world? Authoritarian regimes like North Korea and Russia. That's what they do. Because they don't want their people getting all these ideas of resisting, standing up for their rights, achieving freedoms, making progress, questioning the authoritarian regime. And that's what Trump is trying to do here. That's what Israel is trying to do here as well.
Now, it is interesting to watch, a younger guy who clearly seems to see a lot of what's going on, but then still kind of, it's so interesting. Even myself, as you continue to grow through the work and learn more about different topics, you come to realize things that you still, I was still holding on to that idea. I didn't even realize that I can clearly prove is not true, or, just interesting, even the idea of like North Korea and Russia and like whether or not there's more to the story about what these places are. It's just interesting, but it's fun. I like to see the evolution of people through this field. And he came out early, hot about this conversation in regard to Israel and calling it out, but also question whether this person is one of those kind of out of nowhere pop out, question everything, guys, as always. That's the only way to go. But I agree with the point. And I think what he said there is accurate, and it clearly is driving to a point of all-encompassing control. Now, before I go to the next point, it's relevant to hear this again. This is the leaked recording of Greenblatt telling you about TikTok. And it's funny how after Israel said that place is a problem, Trump started to care about it. And now he's worked it into his control.
But I also The issue in the United States of support for Israel is not left and right.
Exactly.
It is young and old. And the numbers of young people who think that Hamas's, massacre was justified is shockingly and terrifyingly high.
Well, to be honest about it, it's not justified is the word. A large portion of people recognize that it's legally protected act because it's an occupied territory. They just say that means you claim it's justified. There's people out there that claim it, but if you listen to people talk and you understand the people they point to, I've gone through examples myself, and you look at their arguments, what they're saying is an occupied territory has a legal right to armed resistance. And so therefore what happened that day was a legally protected act. They just say justified. See how it becomes overly simplified to demonize you and call you a terrorist.
So we really have a TikTok problem, a Gen Z problem, that our community needs to put the same brains that gave us Taglit, the same brains that gave us all these other amazing innovations, need to put our energy toward this.
A TikTok problem. You just can't, you can only ignore so much, guys. And what did we say when that first started? And we had the leaked audio. We said, well, this is how it's probably going to go. Here we are. Didn't know for sure, right? But damn near, a lot of us, not just me, a lot of us saw the writing on the wall, and here we are. So here is an example. And I think this is a large reason why that is such a big issue for them, because people were starting to realize the problem. And when somebody like Charlie Kirk starts recognizing that problem, I think really centers around Zionism and Netanyahu, as opposed to Israel as a whole, and what that was doing to Trump in his mind caused him to recognize what we're always talking about. That's the argument. Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens, and a lot of people are very clearly telling you that's largely what happened. That he was threatened, that he was scared, that Netanyahu was trying to offer him money that he turned down. And now you've got money coming in. You have his wife in place. You have Ben Shapiro and the rest working through his platform. Ben Shapiro, they called him a clown before he died. It's just hard not to see this being, there's something off. And Adam adds the video of Charlie Kirk saying that Netanyahu let October 7th happen, or at least suggesting that might be the case, has been removed from YouTube. Think about this now after the fact. They all respect his memory and fighting for free speech, but we're going to censor the content he had that says things we don't like. TikTok, YouTube. Funny the timing of all this, right? After they're all consolidating control of the media apparatus. And I said, this must be what it looks like for the rebels to fight the deep state. Same is happening on TikTok. #winning. Here's what he said, in case you missed it.
Israeli hard-right government has a mandate. I gotta be careful the way I say this.
See, just real quick to start, the far-right government. See, in my opinion, what he's highlighting right there is because the whole government is crazy. He's highlighting the Zion, because that's what it is. The really far-right part of it, the Ben Gvir, Smotrich kind of corner, is the radical. They're the religious Zionism, or the, the religious Zionism party, and then there's the Jewish Power Party. I think that's Gvir. The point is that that's their corner, and they're extremely radical Zionists. I think that's what he's calling out, guys. So I think that's important to consider in the bigger picture for where this was going. Not just that he was like, here's a point. A lot of people that are trying to do out there online, which I think is just an extension of the Zionist lie, is to frame Charlie as like seeing the problem of Jewish people. And that then creates this, that's how the Zionism lie keeps us always off balance. The truth is, that's my opinion about it. The truth is, I think he's seeing the real issue. And if you were going to consider that Israel would take somebody out for plenty of other things we talked about, and again, we're talking about somebody who has the most influential conversation, the most influential broadcast to the most influential battleground that we just heard to talk about, as Israel is struggling for its survival, and he starts to change sides, turns down their funding, gets threatened by Bill Ackman, feels blackmailed. The idea that you can't consider that something might have happened right there is staggering to me. I'm not saying I know for a fact, but that's pretty wild.
They're going to try to ethnically cleanse Gaza. Yep. I mean, I don't use that term lightly, okay? They're talking about basically removing 2.5 million people from there, okay? And honestly, they have a mandate to go seek justice and revenge. They do. This idea that they need to have a truce or a peace treaty, that's morally crap after you see women and children be burned alive and dragged to the streets. But
Yeah, let's not forget the many, 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 many lies that were spread about what actually happened after October 7th. Regardless of that, the idea of even suggesting ethnic cleansing is a step too far. And you've seen them. Israel will destroy a person who's hardcore Zionist on their side if they just don't toe the right talking points.
There are some serious questions here, Patrick. And let me tell you, my pattern recognition over the last 5 years has become pretty sharp. COVID, Maui fires, Epstein. When I see a story and it doesn't click.
You mean like literally everybody else in the conversation? I just think that's funny. All the stories that everybody, it's just funny. It's interesting to frame it as like we're super sleuths and we're getting all the information. Everybody was jumping at those stories.
Our guts are usually right. So I've been to Israel many times. The whole country's a fortress. When I first heard this story, I still had the same gut instinct that I did initially. I find this very hard to believe. I've been to that Gaza border. You cannot go 10 feet without running into a 19-year-old with an AR-15 or an automatic machine gun that's an IDF soldier, right? The whole country is surveilled. And so let me just kind of go through this. We don't talk about Israeli politics very often, and most Americans don't know this. The last 9 months, Israel is on the brink of civil war. It's not an exaggeration. This judicial stuff, there were hundreds of thousands of Israelis taking to the streets because Bibi Netanyahu is basically redefining the Israeli constitution. That's not an exaggeration, right? He said the judicial branch has too much power. There were protests planned this week against Netanyahu, where they anticipated tens of thousands of people to take to the streets. That's all gone, Patrick. Netanyahu now has an emergency government and a mandate to lead. I'm not willing to go so far that saying that Netanyahu knew or there was intelligence here. But I think some questions need to be asked. Was there a stand down order?
Wow.
Was there a stand down order?
Of course, you hear that.
6 hours.
What's his name? That's ridiculous co-host scoff. Well, no, obviously, yes, was plenty of evidence to back that up, but typical from the Patrick Value whatever show, but important to see, guys. I mean, I think that's obviously important. And now they've deleted that video from the internet or from YouTube. Why? How is that any different than what? It's because it's Charlie Kirk, and it's because it's being pointed to make a point. And that's what I would think. Oh, let's also not forget that, Donald Trump just actually did this. I can't even believe, to me, you must know Donald Trump is aware of the story, things like 40 beheaded babies being absurdly broken down to be a lie, like from Haaretz, from international communities, from the UN. They lied about it, guys. If you still don't know that, they lied about that. And they walked it back to the very first person that said it. They lied about the babies on a clothes hanger. They lied about babies in an oven. They lied about every single one of those things, guys. And here's Trump yet again pushing this lie. My point is, you must know that it is so surface level at this point that he knows that. Or that somebody would tell him this, or he would be told at some point that he said the wrong thing at some point. But him and Biden have both screamed this lie. And the fact that he's still doing it, either it shows me only one of two things, or a couple things, that he is being pushed to do that because Trump, he doesn't want to be embarrassed by saying something that everyone knows is wrong. What makes the most sense, to put it this way, is that somebody is telling him to say that or asking him to say that. Because anything else just doesn't really line up with what he is, but who knows? But is Trump actually still pushing the October 7th lie about beheaded babies? Yes. Yes, he is.
Stop the killing of civilians. If not now, when will you exercise that power and tell him to stop?
Sure.
And then for both of you,
but you do understand
about Israel, in case you're missing the point. When will you tell them to stop killing children? Right? It's crazy.
Understand about October 7th.
Oh, still okay, but the 7th though, right? So when are you going to tell them to stop killing innocent people, Trump? But the 7th was bad. Are you joking? Like you are either the dumbest person in the room, knowing the kind of response that's going to get, or somebody is making you do that. Right? Yeah, there's probably plenty of other options. I just think it's insane to me. How are you still, after a year and a half, pretending like whatever, even if you think everything they said was true, that still doesn't justify what's happened for a year and a half going forward, or a day of what they did following after that? It's obvious.
Tell him to stop.
Sure.
And then for both of you,
but you do understand about October 7th. You do understand.
So believe me, I understand.
One of the worst days in the history of humanity.
if humanity, see, this is the thing about Trump I always laugh about. Did you really have to go there? Could you have just said the worst thing in Israel's history? One of the worst events we've known of? Like, are you actually saying that that's one of the worst events in humanity? Like, I mean, I don't even need to get into some of the largest events that go, like, from a very long time ago, massive earth-shattering event. But October 7th was one of the largest in humanity, despite the fact on top of it that we know that Israel killed the most people that day, that they executed the Hannibal Directive, that they clearly, even Charlie Kirk is wondering, did they have a stand-down order, all the information swirling about the lies they spun, and of course the ongoing genocide, rape, murder, and starvation of innocent people right up until this very moment. As I'm speaking, they kill people. But that's what he wants you to believe. I genuinely don't think Trump is that stupid. There's certain circumstances where I wouldn't hold him in the highest of regard, but I don't think he's dumb. And that, guys, is stupid. I mean, however you spin it, the amount of information that's out there, the amount of people on the right in particular that know that's not true, here he is. But America first, guys.
What happened, one of the worst days in the history of humanity. What happened, I have seen the tapes.
Oh,
babies that are 4 months.
Yeah, the propaganda tapes that Israel still puts out that have been broken down by many people, even Israelis, even mainstream journalists that come out and go, they lied about it. What's his name? Forget his name off the top of my head, but they lied. They told me this would prove all these things, and I didn't see a single example of those things. More than one, by the way.
Sold and just chopped up to pieces. And you've seen the tapes, and I've seen the tapes. You're a professional, and so am I. And people forget about October 7th. I can't forget about it.
Wow.
Babies that are 4 months old and just chopped up to pieces. And you've seen.
No, not babies, not baby. That didn't happen, guys. Just in case you still don't know that did not happen. It's as simple as that. And people will still screech and push back, but we've gone over this tooth and nail. We've gone over this probably 10 times. To the point to where it's not even worth bringing up the Haaretz articles, both the Hebrew version and the main one, and the UN report, and all the information. It literally shows you that that's absolutely provably debunked. But here he is. And of course, the 250 U.S. state legislators that just went to Israel had the picture there for the 50 States One Israel conference while they're committing a genocide, and everything else we've talked about. Here's what they reported. Israel. 250 visiting U.S. state legislators being urged to pass anti-BDS laws in their states. Something that has been roundly deemed to be flatly unconstitutional. Yay, America. How much you want to bet most of them fall through. So, hypocrisy, censorship, continuing from that point. We already talked about this yesterday. 2 points we mentioned, that kind of framing the larger point, really going off of Whitney's really great work on that article in regard to Biden's America. Before we come back to that, we talked yesterday, the show was titled The Despicable Use of Charlie Kirk to Justify Censorship, Surveillance, and Create Political Division. Still talking about that today. The deeper points we got into, was that's why this image comes from, is that Trump, the Wall Street Journal article, that cites insider information that Trump is angry and not afraid of Netanyahu, which backs up exactly what Kirk was saying and people around him reported that he was telling you. And there's so much reporting about this right now, from Gray Zone to Wall Street Journal and they're all citing different sources. And Harrison from August told you that he was afraid of saying, I don't know how you at this point can deny all of these independent separate sources, even if they're all manufactured. That's a really difficult thing to piece together. Question it like always. But to me, regardless of those sentiments, I already had this sense because of what was going on. So this, Insider Paper reports, just that article, Raging Trump declares Netanyahu is effing me after Israel carried out the Qatar attack. Very frustrated by his handling of Gaza. Yet, ultimately, the article goes on to cite people that argue that they're using a fake division to push policy, so that's worth considering. But overall, I do think that every time this happens, Israel does something that makes Trump look incompetent, inept. Trump, or Biden, they say, we're going to do this together, and then Israel does what it wants. And then they're forced to go, but that's what we meant, even though it was embarrassingly not. They constantly, and I'm just generally making it, that happens in multiple different ways with agendas every day with this country. I think they like showing the world that they can do what they want. Now, Joel says, I love how Trump is supposedly always raging against Netanyahu. That's what the right wants you to think, right? Jones says, they're going to split. I told you, and then didn't. I love how Trump is supposedly always raging against Netanyahu, but nothing ever changes. Yeah, I agree. Now, we also talked yesterday about this article, Who is a Terrorist in Biden's America? Whitney wrote this originally for TLAV in 2021. And it's important to understand what she was painting this picture. And it's worth your time to go through and watch and listen to that and read it yourself, rather. Because the picture that was being painted is exactly what's happening now with a different slant. It's, who is a terrorist in Trump's America? And it's the same ideas. And it's the same conversation. What they're using with Charlie Kirk and political violence, it's exactly what was listed out by Biden. And they're now using Biden's plan to go after whoever they want. So on that point, here is the White House put this out yesterday, or is it? Yeah, yesterday. Quote, "You have no idea what you have ignited," was a quote from Erica Kirk. But this video, the point I'm making here is just this. Every day, just like Netanyahu, they're using him aggressively every day. 34 posts to say every Charlie Kirk, and we're fighting for his memory, and everybody. It is overwhelming, especially since what they're doing is contradicting what he wanted. Right? They're using his name to censor people. They're using his information or their framing of what he wanted to go after people politically. Now, you could argue in some cases, I would agree that is what he wants in certain categories or said about Israel and people that, whatever. But when it comes to his free speech stance, at least he stated pretty consistently that he did believe that there was no such thing as hate speech. And here they are using his name every single day. And again, the larger point from this article is the idea of creating these political divisions, creating the ideas that are used to pit us against each other and to frame the other side as always being the other, in this case, like the idea of political violence, the idea of racism, the idea of, the woke left and right. Now, Dan Bongino adds another point to this that is majorly important to that article. He says the FBI has and will continue to aggressively pursue individuals and groups who further their political and social ideologies through coordinated violent extremism. That was the crux of the point in the article. Domestic violent extremists, apolitical or non-political, or whatever they say, we'll go after all of them, and that's what they're using. And so what this is coming, and they're even putting out new reports I might go over in another show about how they're transitioning away from the mass casualties and more about the special isolated events and really just framing where this is going to go, apparently. But extreme violence, political why. And what the point is that they're saying the words are that, just like the left was before. You say this, you say fascist, you're inciting violence. And inciting to violence was a main part of Biden's push. It says, as an example, in LA, the FBI and our law enforcement partners arrested over 800 people on criminal charges related to civil unrest. How much you want to bet the vast majority of them were people that were picked up for protesting and largely let go? But they'll go, 800 people and we're changing the world. It's what they do. Overall, people that were simply protesting, or even if there was violence, the idea that this is not the way they're trying to frame this is like they're on the path of going after. These people are PR people, in my opinion. And it says, and in Dallas, a joint FBI and Texas Department of Public Safety investigation has led to charges of 20 people to date for their roles in an organized attack on an immigration holding facility that resulted in the attempted murder of a law enforcement officer. So a very specific example of one case that they feel is politically motivated, they can go after the left. Instead of the very obvious chaotic, there's so many things that these people should be doing, let alone Epstein, all the other conversations, or all the Democrats that said they were going to arrest. But it says, these are just a couple of the more significant examples of the FBI's work to address these types of incidents. Individuals and groups are, as we move forward, to aggressively bring these individuals to justice. They're creating the idea that political violence, they're beginning to push the momentum into going after the left, or really just whoever they want to use it for going forward, but starting with people the right will be okay with and allowing that to undermine the constitutional reality. But here, I just want to laugh at the idea they keep doing this. Like, why would they, why would you as the person in this position feel the need to be like, here's some things I just did. I'm doing my job. Just do your job, man. Just do it. Give us results. Don't do the PR dance and act like you're changing everything when most people can see that's not really what's happening. Vernacular says, we're cracking down on poor people to distract you from the wealthy, powerful criminals we're protecting. I agree. And he says, Jeffrey Epstein killed himself and trafficked kids to nobody. They both pretend. DC Drano says, I'll be honest, it's completely unacceptable that Antifa has been allowed to exist this long. Now, look, you know as well as I've talked for a long time, well before this big hype about Antifa, what it represents, just like Patriot Front, and not every single individual, because we're not broad stroke hyperbolic partisans. It's obvious to point out that people can be involved in this, not know they're part of some operation, or people in Patriot Front that don't realize they're part of some hype, yes, obviously. So to be objective, the point is we know how these groups can be used, just like Oath Keepers, for example, had FBI informants. They can use these groups. They do use these groups. But to keep doing this whole left-right game where they go, every single one, and they shouldn't exist, they're all terrorists, is insane. Because terrorist is a very real thing to call somebody, a very clearly legal implications. Matt Walsh just said, grab all the left terrorists and put them to death. So now that you just said everybody in Antifa is a terrorist, that random 16-year-old kid that joined because he thought he was fighting the power, Matt Walsh wants you to kill that guy. And we're going to pretend like that's not incitement to violence. The reality is every partisan team sport player is doing the same thing. Inciting the other side as if they're the end all be all, going to kill the country and the world. I've been saying this forever. It's only just now really coming to a head in the conversation. But he's saying they should have been declared this a long time ago. That's no different than saying they should declare any other right-leaning militia group or anything else as terrorists because you don't like their ideology. If they break the law, arrest them, guys. If they bash a window in, throw them in jail. But this idea that you could just call they're terrorists now, I mean, it's just lazy, and this will lead to the destruction of this country, the removal of our rights. People like Drano don't care. Hey, how's that Epstein binder going, bud? You still breaking down the truth? He says, they wear black uniforms and face masks and shields. They have centralized communication, recruitment, policies, and financing. I mean, that statement alone is not applicable to every single group that's even a part of this apparatus. But yes, some of them do. But you see, that's what objective, nuanced reporting would be like, not hyperbolic, one-sided claims. And he says they were brought here by foreign agents in 2017. Again, just when he goes, they are violent paramilitary terrorists. Okay, so thinking about all of that. Black uniforms, masks, even shields, centralized communication, recruitment, policies, financing, brought here by foreign agents, violent paramilitary. Okay, I said, well, is he referring to ICE or Antifa? Yes, exactly the point. Because you could pretend it's all of those points apply. Maybe you don't think so. But the point again is to make it all or nothing, right? Even with the people in ICE, guys, are you going to be honest enough from the left to point out that some of these people are just doing their jobs and they shouldn't be held immediately accountable for everything that everyone else might be doing at the extreme versions of it? Yes, because there's some of these ICE agents and some of them that are basically bounty hunters that are just using the vest that are out of their minds. But some people may be doing the job because they think they're trying to actually fight illegal immigration. I can be objective enough to point that out as much as I can see the larger problem. Again, this is what we need to be doing today, guys. It's so easy to make these people look like ridiculous cartoons when you just act objectively. Here's Trump about Antifa. Where was this one? Hold on. Oh, maybe I didn't. Oh, you know what? I didn't grab it. That's right. Just Trump War Room wrote POTUS on Antifa. They have signs and they're all, oh, wait, no, I did want to get this. That's weird. Let me grab it real quick. Sorry, I'm just looking at, sometimes I'm just baffled how I mix these things up. It takes so much effort because every time I do this, I hate it. I hate that I have to take the time to, I'm very, very adamant about trying not to let it happen. It's just funny to me. Oh, wait. Oh, I guess that is the one. Sorry. Yeah, see, I'm doing it to myself. Okay, here it is.
Charlie said.
Hold on.
That's the other thing. They have signs and they're all professional.
Okay, sorry. I know what I did now. So there's two clips that we're going to play here. One of them is the one about hate speech, which we started with. You'll get that one in a second. This one is what I want to grab now. All right, let's play this clip. Where are we? There we go.
That's the other thing. They have signs and they're all professionally made. Real protesters make them in their basement.
See, what kind of qualification is, yeah, I mean, clearly, guys, people can get high, like, let's make being objective, clearly. Obviously, people who are average protesters can absolutely be part of some larger group that gets financing or gets funding. It doesn't automatically make them some dishonest entity. Or individual people can absolutely go out and buy nice signs and even bring some to give people out. But do I understand how that is? There is a manipulation. Yes, I've talked about it longer than Trump has. Okay. The idea really obviously that all partisan team sport politics players are, part of some, like whether you're talking about like a, what's a good example? Like even during like the trucker convoy point where people were framing the whole thing as one part, or going back to like Occupy Wall Street, how there's elements that were actually manipulated by the government. I do believe, or even Patriot Front and so on. I do believe there's manipulative groups out there that get funding, or protest, they come out with fake signs. I do believe that absolutely astroturfing 100% happens. But for anybody to make the claim, especially as you're claiming that they're borderline terrorists without any evidence to back it up. In many cases, what you could point to these things and prove that they're not organized by some central, that these are just people protesting genocide. Or like the group in the restaurant. That's actually, I think, what he's referencing right here in many cases is I think it was Code Pink. Like, if you want to try to pretend or make them out to be some like secret Russian asset or whatever they're doing, prove it. Because the reality is, these are people that are simply out there protesting what you're doing. On both sides, that exists. Again, he is literally trying to frame this as they are organized, lying, manipulative, even referencing foreign government influence in order to undermine American rights. So if you're going to make these claims, if you were a real journalist, you would demand he prove those claims.
That's the other thing. They have signs and they're all professionally made. Real protesters make them in their basement. Right,
because he likes, I'm sorry, stop it. He likes when you're the small, lone guy with no real influence, right? Break off and do your own thing because you're easier to shut down.
All the same.
So who's behind it? Do you have a gut feeling?
You hear Soros. I don't know. We're going to find out if he's behind it. But it's incitement to riot.
Oh, there it is. Okay. So you hear Soros. Great. So he's listening to people online. That makes you feel great. Now, I can ignore the obvious machine that is the Soros operation that absolutely does this. No, just like I wouldn't ignore the exact same thing happening from the right all over the place through many different examples like Elon Musk, or even the larger technocratic side of this, or even a Soros overlap. If you really understand how this is being done, not just blindly adhere to the partisan lie. But listen to what he just said.
Incitement to riot.
Okay, what is? That they have signs? Or that they're professionally made, or that they're protesting. Those are the only three things he talked about. What is exactly incitement to riot, Donald Trump? I think this is important to listen to again.
That's the other thing. They have signs and they're all professionally made.
Okay.
Real protesters make them in their basement.
Okay, so let's say it's an organized group that's being paid from some shadowy left-wing group. Okay.
And they're all the same.
So who's behind it? Do you have a gut feeling?
You hear Soros.
Okay, so let's just even say it is funded by Soros. Okay.
I don't know. We're going to find out if he's behind it.
Okay.
But it's incitement to riot.
What is? That people are funding this? Even if it is Soros, even if it is a manipulative group that's pretending to be grassroots, how is that incitement to violence? He's basically jamming together the agenda. He just skipped over the part where he claims they were acting violently. But see, the insinuation is because he's just so fast and loose with this that the left is always violent, right? They're all terrorists. So therefore, it's incitement to violence if they protest. Simple, right? Guys, you can't miss how obvious this is. I think it's worth playing this one yet again, which is, see, the more you get consistent with this, you show that it wasn't a slip of the tongue. It's actually how he thinks.
On Saturday, we're going to have a lot of, and if there's any protester that wants to come out, they will be met with very big force. By the way, for those people that want to protest, they're going to be met with very big force.
Where are all the people that pretend to support the Constitution standing around him? Excuse me, Mr. Trump, that's actually unconstitutional. Nope, doesn't matter. He doesn't like that they're going to come out and protest his parade. So we're going to be met with force. Constitutionally protected acts. But go ahead and defend that, hypocrites. So obviously, guys, what he's saying here is a big deal.
A criminal act. And people are behind it. But it's incitement to riot. That's a criminal act. And people...
Yeah, that isn't a criminal act if you're doing that. Not being framed for that or alleged to do that with nothing to back it up.
People are dying because of it.
Because of what? People making signs? You see, I hope you're getting my point here. His mind just jumped to the they're all violent terrorist point before he even filled in the gap. He said they're making signs and Soros. Incitement to violence. They're all terrorists.
So it's really, it's death. So we're going to...
It's death?
You know, you hear Soros. I don't know. We're going to find out if he's behind it. But it's incitement to riot. That's a criminal act. And people are dying because of it. So it's really, it's death. So we're gonna find out, and it should have been done a long time ago.
Right. So now at some point somebody died in the midst of something like this. Therefore, it's death now. Can we just collectively laugh at how dumb? I mean, dumb's not even the word. How? What would you call it? Everyone who's willing to. I mean, are we going to just go there? It's all death now? Well, obviously not. This is not all death. We can all see that. So just to make it hyperbolic, they're going, "Oh, Ryan, you're taking him too literally." No, he just literally said that, guys. The game where you play this whole Jones version, where you go to him to tell you what he thinks Trump's actually meant, it's ridiculous. He's consistent. He says the same things. He means what he says, and you guys all pretend like it's a wink, wink, secret back 5-door chest, whatever it is. It's embarrassing. The reality is that he does not care about the Constitution when it bumps up against what he wants, or if he's even embarrassed. If you think that's any different than the left, you're not paying attention. He's just very clumsy about it. So, next point. Let's talk about, there's like 3 segments here, and we're going to get into the censorship, the cancel culture. But the first point I thought was important to kind of highlight by itself. There's the whole big thing. Every one of these all these major influencers are out there screaming about how despicable it was that people in Congress didn't do what they thought they should do. Now, you could even argue, I mean, look, just as a respect factor, I don't know why in the world you would vote to not, I always laugh at this anyway. Like, why do we need to go, I condemn the thing that's bad? And unless you say, I condemn the bad thing, then they secretly go, he doesn't condemn the bad thing. Maybe they don't. But why, like President Trump needs to come out and be like, I condemn that bad thing that happened. And everyone's like, oh, he just condemned it. When all the reports, Trump condemns the bad thing. It's just ridiculous. It doesn't make any sense. You don't need to officially do this. Everyone can think what they want. The reality is it's a sad event. It's a political maneuver, guys. So the House votes 310 to 58 to condemn Charlie Kirk's assassination. That's not the assassinator, but condemn the assassination. So bad thing happened, right? I mean, come on. Yes. So the real point is that those people are insensitive. Okay, fair. Okay, I mean, it's wild the way that they turn this into this is some earth-shattering moment. Just like every partisan team sport politics will do, they act like their thing matters and you are not respecting my thing, and then the other side happens and the same thing happens in reverse. 58 Democrats voted against it. Okay. Now, you could say it's disrespectful, say it's disgusting, say it's repugnant. But they have a right to vote however they want. So in what world are the free speech advocates and the constitutionalists telling us that these people need to be removed from Congress because they didn't vote the way that we think they should based on an emotional point? But that's what we're talking about. Condemning the assassination has no legal standing. It doesn't cause any legal maneuver. It just is them going, we don't like the bad thing. And you didn't vote the right way on emotionally calling out the bad thing. And just in case you didn't see, in every possible way, I think I shouldn't even need to be like, the assassination is bad after I make this point, because this is the whole game. Obviously, the reality of having empathy and humanity about people being killed is something we always talk about on the show. So anybody can frame that the way they want. Frankly, I don't care about your petty partisan manipulations. This is sad to me. Benny Johnson, the rest, acting like they care about what people think and ideological, like the idea that what you're doing here is controlling the way people think, claiming that they're only allowed to see it a certain way, even if you find their stance repugnant, is contradictory to everything you claim you're fighting for. Right. The whole thing about free speech is that we protect even the bad ideas. Remember that? Remember how many times you guys shoved that in our faces, and I agree with it. But now they have the bad idea, and you go, not allowed. Pearl clutching and all. Gunther Eagleman. AOC just took to the House. We can listen to it. Criticize what we can. Point out the parts that, regardless of it, are protected. AOC just took to the House floor to defend her no vote on the resolution honoring the life of Charlie Kirk or condemning the assassination. See, we'll frame it how we want to make them look stupid. Either way you look at it, it'll be about that. They didn't do it, so they're not honoring him. Maybe so, fine. What does this have to do with the country, the legalities? What does it have to do with crime? What about the Epstein list? We're all arguing about whether they have the right kind of emotional stance around Charlie Kirk. I find that insane. This is going to make your blood boil. That's what it's about. That's what Gunther Eagleman says. They're trying to get you emotionally worked up so you ignore everything that matters. AOC, we should be clear about who killed Charlie Kirk was. His rhetoric and beliefs were ignorant, uneducated, sought to disenfranchise millions. How dare she disagree with how you think Charlie Kirk was? This ideological purity test around who they think about and whether they're allowed to say what they think about Charlie Kirk is just an extension of the same way they deal with Israel, guys. It's insane to me. Like, I mean, the definition of it, it's schizophrenic if you actually pretend they believe what they say they do. And he says, AOC is a vile and disgusting woman who just used Congress to push the same rhetoric that incites violence. Now, again, it's the same point every time. Every part of these partisan team sport politics are pushing the kind, and I'll go through it again. Trump calling them fascist. So if all they are is clutching their pearls about, they said fascist, how dare they? They're inciting violence. Well, then so did Trump. And my point would be that neither of them should be held accountable for speech because it's free speech. They're not held accountable, rather just, censored or legally acted upon, or, everything that's happening is built around the idea that they're not allowed to say what they're saying. She does not belong in Congress. That's where this goes. Trump literally just pushed the same idea for the whole squad. They're trying to get them removed from Congress. Why? Because Laura Loomer pushed it. That should make you really uncomfortable that somebody as disgusting as her is quite literally seemingly driving policy. Let's listen to it. Of course, she can leave her prayers at the door. Oh, because she said prayers and because she says it's sad. And right, those don't matter though, because even though she said that, she's making it all up. Like it's all this emotional game they play. Overall, it's the same idea. They can say whatever they want, whether you think it's repugnant or not. And now the constitutionalist free speech warriors are the one trying to shut them down because they're broflakes, right? They're the snowflake in this conversation, just like they said about the left when the same thing was happening the other way around.
I thank Gentleman Representative Green for his graciousness. Today, the Republican House majority brought to the floor a resolution honoring, quote, honoring the life and legacy of Charlie Kirk.
Now, just right there, even she says, quote, I mean, you have to realize those are the people that are trying to censor people around Charlie Kirk. So you're not really honoring his memory when you're using him to do something that he was adamantly against. See, that's an objective point, guys. But they're going to go, you're censor Ryan because he's saying the mean thing about Charlie Kirk. But free speech, though, right?
Charlie Kirk's assassination was a horrific and vile attack and incident of political violence.
Okay, so whether or not she means that, you can't keep pretending like she didn't just clearly go, look, that's bad, and that shouldn't happen, and it's wrong.
And condemning the depravity of Kirk's brutal murder is a straightforward matter, one that is especially important to help stabilize an increasingly unsafe and volatile political environment where everyday people feel more at risk.
Now, look, first of all, I don't support anybody in government. I think they're all out there, especially people like this. I've called out her contradictions many times. But what she is saying so far is exactly, if you look at just the way they frame it, they're basically misrepresenting what's being done. And the overarching reality is that it really comes down to the fact that they said opinions that she's allowed to have about Charlie's content that they don't like. Now, if you just truly engage with that and are honest about how crazy that is, that the right is doing that, this is the larger point. That's why I framed it today as this illusory fake, this free speech battle. You can clearly prove to yourself, if you're not partisan, that both the left and the right of the two-party illusion act like they care about free speech when they need to, but never actually bring that to pass. It's the same thing we're dealing with here. She has every right to stand up and say whatever she wants about him right now. Everything, by the way. You can stand up and say look, realistically, from the free speech standpoint, she can get up and say he deserved to die. I don't think that. But the point is that she has a right to say that, and that's too much for them, let alone that he didn't say the right ideas.
We can deeply disagree and come together as a country to denounce the horror of this killing. And it is not a license for the abuse of power and whitewashing of American history. Today's resolution only underscores the majority's recklessness by choosing to author this condemnation and honoring on a purely partisan basis.
All right. So point's important right there is because of the petty partisan game they all play. So when they come at this, and this is objectively clear, this is about a partisan political point they're making. So they can go, ooh, look, they didn't do the thing. That's what this was planned to do. But the point is that they knew they were doing that, so they voted no on it out of pure just like partisan division. They all do this every single time they have a vote like this. We've seen, here's a good example. Remember when Tulsi Gabbard comes out with the Stop Arming Terrorists Act? And most everybody voted it down because the reality was actually not a good example. That's just a point that shows you that they are all on the same side, really. And the reality was it was very simple. They shouldn't fund Al-Qaeda affiliates, and they all voted no. I guess the better example would be something like where I'm trying to think of an example off the top of my head about where you have a situation where the left comes out with a purely political point. Like, you could even say something like condemning violence on January 6th or whatever. Which, okay, there was violence, and there shouldn't be a problem condemning that violence, especially if you're honest about the fact that there was largely not violence, but they know what left is trying to do by making that case, so they vote no. And they come out and go, look, they didn't care about the violence. Is that really the case? Probably not entirely, but it's the same kind of way they play this. And they all know what they're doing, but it's the game of the Eagle Guthermans and the Nick Sorters out there that are like, hair on fire, this is the most important thing I've ever seen in my life, breaking news, and they all put breaking news all day long. It's kind of sad.
Instead of uniting Congress in this tragedy with one of the many bipartisan options to condemn political violence and Kirk's murder, as we did with the late Melissa Hortman. Instead, the majority proceeded with a resolution that brings great pain to the millions of Americans who endured segregation, Jim Crow, and the legacy of bigotry today.
Now, whether or not you think Charlie had racist opinions is irrelevant. She is allowed to think what she wants. She's even if you think she's lying about that, well, that's protected under free speech, guys. The free speech side is supposed to know this. So the idea that you're just trying to wait, I'll wait till then.
We should be clear about who Charlie Kirk was. A man who believed that the Civil Rights Act that granted Black Americans the right to vote was a mistake. Who, after the violent attack on Paul Pelosi, claimed that, quote, some amazing patriot, unquote, should bail out his brutal assailant.
Now, that's actually true, but in general, I was going to say quickly that I'll let her play out. There's a lot of the points she makes that are nuanced, right? That aren't as one-sided as she makes it out to be, but some of them are fair. Like the point I'll get into in a second about, and I already made it clear the other day, about his stance around the black pilot and so on. Now, there's parts of it that I would argue do very clearly overlap with levels of racism, but it's not really his point. It was about the DEI use of that and whether or not because of that person that was there because of DEI, therefore not the best person for the job. I flatly agree with that, whether or not they're Black, right? But we'll get into that in a second. My point is, though, she'll frame that as hated Black people. And I don't think that's correct. Not the real sense we're talking about, but it's her opinion.
And accused Jews of controlling, quote, not just the colleges. It's the nonprofits, it's the movies, it's Hollywood, it's all of it. Unquote.
Is that even true, by the way? I don't think that's Charlie Kirk, but if it is, it's hilarious to me with the way we're talking about this today, because obviously that's a Zionist manipulation of the Zionist control on those things, but it's also something that he was clearly ardently pro-Israel. But only recently was he starting to highlight the Zionist. And I like in my experience, and tell me in the chat, I've never seen him say the Jews control everything, because that seems to completely undermine what his stance was. But again, I didn't really immerse myself in his content. I wasn't really a big fan of the very partisan content anywhere. So in the chat, tell me what you think about that, because I find it to be pretty interesting. And I see it as an example of something that she just kind of broad strokes, like the right does this, where I don't think he really did. But tell me in the chat if you know that or not.
Quote. His rhetoric and beliefs were ignorant, uneducated, and sought to disenfranchise millions of Americans.
I don't agree with that in every case. Plenty of points he made, I think I agree with. But some cases you could argue were in that general category. Either way, she has a right to think what she wants.
Far from the working tirelessly to promote unity, unquote, asserted by the majority in this resolution. It is equally important that Congress does unite to reject the government's attempt to weaponize this moment into an all-out assault on free speech across the country.
Which is what's happening. Now, I'll also point out, I don't believe that she truly cares about that, at least not in the sense where it comes down to her side, where she will go after people that are saying bad things about Israel or, well, nuanced in even her regard, but she has continued to fund them and has in many cases backed up things about anti-Semitism, or any number of ideas around hate speech or pronouns. Right? So that's okay though, because those are important. So it's the same hypocrisy from either way, but from a different narrative. This is the point, guys. So we know that when it comes to that, they'll call for censorship around those ideas, but stand here all righteous about how they want to shut down free speech. And yes, it's right for you to call out that hypocrisy, but in doing so, don't then hide the fact that it's happening right now as well, or act like that's okay because they did it first. We're not in kindergarten, guys.
In the name of Charlie Kirk, President Trump and the FCC are now cynically threatening to shut down ABC and any outlets who give airtime to the administration's political critics.
We'll get there.
This is a disgusting attack on the American people and the very First Amendment rights that define us as a country. It is also the ABC Corporation's responsibility to refuse to embolden and participate in this corruption and escalation of censorship. We continue to pray for Mr. Kirk's family and loved ones in the wake of this terrible act. I am thinking especially of his children and his wife, whose grief cannot be measured. And with that, I yield back to the gentleman.
I mean, just think about taking that and turning it into this. Breaking, by the way, totally not breaking. There's been 17 other people that posted it, but, they all do that to get your attention. 17 flashing red lights. AOC just took to the House floor to defend her no vote. Make your blood boil? I mean, that is benign. I mean, other than the claims of, misogynist and things that especially with a family agree, that would upset somebody. But in the larger sense, those are just opinions of his content, which were contentious. I mean, things that I cover are contentious. So it causes people to be politically divided. But to frame this like some kind of vile, disgusting person who's trying, this is just insane to me. These people have an agenda and they're trying to fit that agenda no matter what's going on. What she did right there was measured, was in many ways accurate, but ultimately said things that could be seen as offensive to people that believe Charlie was something else. But are we not of the mind that that's protected free speech? We know that it is. The point is people don't care right now. Justin Colin Rugg says, AOC says the resolution to honor Kirk's name brings great pain to millions of Americans. Isn't it funny how you break out one little part of it? And that's not even what she actually said. She says the way they're doing this and using it to divide and using Charlie Kirk to do it because of his contentious ideas was bringing great pain to millions of Americans and then listed specific groups in that regard. Now, you could still be offended by that, but what he's doing is trying to simply say, honoring Charlie Kirk is great, bringing pain to everybody. It's a deceptive way to frame it. And says she and 57 others voted against this resolution. Despicable. Right. It's despicable to disagree. But you know what? It's good, Colin Rugg, because I'm glad we all agree that the reason free speech exists, or rather we enshrine it within the Constitution, is because we defend despicable ideas. Right? I guess that only applies when you're talking about people on your side. Here is Stephen Miller. It's just this guy pointing out the 58 Democrats that voted against it. And Stephen Miller says, this is so vile, I don't even have words. Vile to vote? You get it. Like I said, I'm going to try not, I want, why I want to get the point every time? Because I want it to be in the face of the guy doing it. This lazy-eyed sociopath, Stephen Miller, Zionist, deserves to have, I want to frame him as the person doing that. It's kind of where it comes from. But, it's hard not to do the same thing. So it's almost like somebody may tune in and miss it. Either way, it's the same point through all of this. You can think it's vile and disagree, but obviously they have a right to think what they want about these ideas. Here, Dean Cain, your words disgust me. Well, again, good thing we all agree that the idea of protecting free speech is about protecting the worst of ideas, right? Right, Dean Cain? But clearly they forgot that today. Now, to be fair, all he said was they disgust me. He didn't say censor her. So maybe Dean is not the one calling for that, but with his whole, I'm joining ICE and I'm part of the, it's kind of hard to see him being just like a token on the agenda. But fair enough. You can say, you feel free to scream. Free speech. Her ideas are disgusting. Yeah, that's why it exists. But what's happening is they're claiming because it's disgusting that we need to remove her from Congress, or she's not allowed to say that because it's disrespectful, whatever. Here is Marjorie Taylor Greene, kind of proving to me, like I said, that whether her stance on Israel was aligning with the reality or not, I sensed it was opportunism. And I still will point at it when she says the right thing. Here's what she says today. AOC is trashing Charlie Kirk right now on the House floor. Well, no, she went over his ideas and listed them as things that she disagreed with. And, there's even somebody the other day that said rapist, for example. And maybe that was a typo on racist, somebody pointed out. But either way, that's a very serious claim that implies criminal activity. So that's a different category. But when you're claiming that these things were misogynist or racist, you could disagree, and it's just not trash. Well, you could argue let's just even say it's trashing somebody. Well, that's also protected. She is lying about him and again repeating the same vile garbage at the same time, claiming to pray for his family, or no, just saying she prayed for his family. You could argue that she didn't, but you don't know that for sure. You're fitting what you want to be the case into your narrative, which is that she's lying about that. Yeah, I can consider that's possible, but I'm also not as blindly partisan as you guys are and pretend that's the fact because it fits into what I want to be the case. Vile garbage, lies. That's completely subjective. But that's the game today, right? No, you don't get to be subjective in areas where we don't want you to be, like Israel, for example. Even though she projects the idea that we're calling that Israel, watch as we go forward and many, like the votes around anti-Semitism, for example, she's on the same side. There is no way forward with these people, meaning Democrats. Here's what's interesting, by the way. This guy simply points out, and I'll give you the nuance. And this is the DEI point I was making before. But he says AOC is not lying. Here's what J.D. Vance has to say, and then the comparative point. You can decide, and I'll make a point about what I think is what Charlie Kirk's core point was in there.
Writer accuses Charlie of saying, and I quote, "Black women do not have brain processing power to be taken seriously." But if you go and watch the clip, the very clip she links to, you realize he never said anything like that. He never uttered those words.
If we would have said that Joy Reid and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks, we would have been called the racist. But now they're coming out and they're saying it for us. They're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously.
Okay. It's interesting, right? Because the idea here clearly is, so there's many points to pluck out of this. Okay, so first of all, Vance says that the statement somebody made, which I can't verify, was that he said all black people, which was clearly not what he said. Right? He said these specific people and list their names off and then said that they're affirmative action, but then exactly says what Vance said he didn't say in the rest of it. Typical partisan one-sided narratives, there's usually truth somewhere in the middle. The reality of it, though, in my opinion, is that what he's actually saying, other than that very last part, is that, and this is easy to understand, if you have a system that is trying to put people in positions not based on merit, but based on certain social and political and identity points, right? Like being a black person or being, another minority or being a gay person, whatever it is. That by definition means that you're not the most qualified. You're picking somebody based on those you could argue that in some cases that could both happen, but we've very clearly proven, and they've stressed the idea that the idea is not about necessarily the most merit, but rather filling out the diversity. I don't know why anybody would ever agree with that. Why? For anything. Why do you want some people in a position that aren't going to be the best for the job? Sometimes that happens just by default or like organic process, but why you would choose to not pick the best people, it's insane to me. Even if you think racial diversity is the most important thing in the world, you're undermining other things to achieve it. So, okay, in a general sense, when you can say that therefore, if they were DEI picks or rather just, affirmative action, then by definition, that means that they weren't the best for the job. And so his point was, you could argue that means that they, because of that, weren't. And that therefore you can make the case that they didn't have the mental capacity. But right there, that doesn't mean that they could be the number 2 in the line, right? Like we saw with the airline pilot. They made the whole case about the woman, but then it turned out that she was like second in class and was basically one of the best people in the job. But that didn't matter because women, So the first part of it, I do agree with. I think it's important to highlight that system, which is when you're objective and not partisan, you can see through the cracks of it all, and the DEI is ridiculous in many cases, but also that the argument should be the person's choice who's making the hiring. But the last parts of this, and I'll play it again really quickly, and also just the idea that you're saying didn't have enough brain power. Like, look, I insult politicians all the time in similar ways, so you could argue that's the same thing, right? It's the last part that I think stands out as there's really no question that there's a level of racism that's involved in this last part.
Accuses Charlie
be taken really seriously. I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously.
Now, look, I've KJP, right? So fair enough. I've made the same point, but in the point he's making, he's referring to the idea of affirmative action. Okay, but still fair enough. It's, you could insult them on the back end of it. They made the point. Take it as you will, but it's this point.
You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously.
Okay, so why is it a white person's slot? By default. Why is that the case? Well, I guess you could argue because DEI is about basically anything other than white, which is a fair point. But at the same time, you could also argue that the black person could just be the best person for the job, right? Is that not possible in the conversation? I mean, there's points to be made here, guys. But the idea is that you're not allowed to make these cases, and that you have people like J.D. Vance from the vice president's, his office or his house, broadcasting through Charlie Kirk's platform to argue that what they said was false, even though it really wasn't false. It was just a little bit more, they made it more broad than it should have been, so maybe a little bit dishonest. But true, though. He did say that. So you see the game, people then go off Vance and say that that's not true, it's completely fake. Well, no, there's actually some truth to it, especially the last part that I think adds to with a bigger picture. But all of it is irrelevant when you understand that he has a right to say and think what he wants. And people now have a right to say and think what they want about what he said and think. I don't know why this is so difficult for people. It's only difficult for people that actually have no principle or people who are actively fighting for something else to undermine this country's rights. Now, here's Glenn Beck. He's one of the many that are out there just, screaming forward this agenda. He writes, it speaks volumes the left made Jimmy Kimmel the bigger martyr than Charlie Kirk. Okay, weren't they the ones telling us that martyr was a terrorist thing? Anybody with a brain already knew that it was just a word that had a meaning. It didn't have to be associated like jihad, like intifada. It's just a word with meaning, and mostly they just mean resistance. It doesn't have to mean the terrorist. Even from a Muslim perspective, it doesn't. You could look it up for yourself. They make it that way, though, because it's easier to frame the other. But I find it interesting that they would always claim that the martyr thing, like when Gaza would talk about their martyrs, and they would be like, they're all terrorists. They just told you. Because they're, lazy, ignorant points. Well, funny how they're now openly, in not just this case, but plenty of others, calling Charlie Kirk a martyr. It's interesting. And you could make the case. The term would apply, especially if you argue, it's really about what the side chooses to do. So they're turning him into a martyr, right? But the idea that they decided to make Jimmy Kimmel a bigger martyr, so this makes my case. It's not really about the truth or any of it. It's about which side could use their thing more. And that's just disgusting. Now, let's get into the Jimmy Kimmel point and a few others that I think are very relevant. But one thing before that, actually, but just this idea that they're out there, they're required to mourn and speak about the person that we want them to because we demand it. Sure sounds like the left to me, doesn't it? Well, Daniel McAdams says, I'm going to just drop this right here. Who else thinks Ron Paul should just shut up after being right after about everything for a half century? So this guy literally posted this. Ron Paul earlier put this out, and it says, if Democrat cancel culture was wrong, how can Republican cancel culture be right? Obvious, guys. Consistency, principle. It's a breath of fresh air, and I believe people are thirsty for it. Bad analogy overlap, but you get the point. And this guy says, I'm ready for Ron Paul to stop talking. Paul was an incredible man, but he's living 50 years in the past, right? Oh, that old school archaic free speech idea that we all otherwise swear we're fighting for. Got it. Well, he responds by saying, this is one of the few times I've thought Ron Paul got something wrong, ever. No one's perfect. He says libertarians aren't going to achieve their desired ends by replaying the peace-love strategy of 20 years ago. America has changed. Yeah, this is an alarming push from people acting like they're fighting for our rights when really what they're doing is fighting to normalize the idea that it's archaic. That what one is like a technocratic CEO that fights for, development and whatever it is they claim they're working for, and your rights are archaic and old, and you should just, I don't even know how that works out. Overall, peace and love is not even remotely what we're talking about. We're talking about adherence to first principles. Free speech, chief among them. Libertarians aren't going to achieve that. Like, think about what he's saying right there. It's just so ridiculous. But overall, that all he said was, if their cancel culture was wrong, how can the right be wrong? So are you trying to say that they're not doing that? Or are you simply saying, and this is what I think he's actually saying, and I'll get to some more examples of it, that we are doing that? And yes, it's hypocritical, but screw them. They did it first. And it's okay because they're the real problem. You know, this is a common thread among the conversation right now. Screw it. Take the mask off, right? We don't need to pretend anymore. They're the crazy ones, and we're just putting it back in their face. That's really happening right now. Daniel McAdams says, no one is talking about a peace-love strategy. The clip was about how the FCC should not come down like a ton of bricks on a television program that it did not agree with. He says that is what happened, and is what happened. We'll go over it. If you support that kind of thing, then I would suggest you are essentially on the left. He says, dude wants to censor Ron Paul's statement that the government shouldn't censor folks. The irony. Now, that's not necessarily accurate, so it was funny, but the point is that's a real part of this right now. Here's Nick Fuentes. When the left was in power, they censored millions of ordinary people for expressing basic conservative opinions. They did. Now, really just the government did, by the way, but yes, that's how that went down. They allowed Antifa, Black Lives Matter to intimidate conservatives, violence. Yeah, very much. But there were plenty of people in both those groups that were not part of an agenda who thought they were doing something right. He says it's only because they were weak now that they suddenly rally behind free speech. And that's it. Great. So the guy who's making fair arguments up until now about the absolute right of free speech is simply now telling you, or rather what he's doing here is what everyone's doing. It's a low-hanging fruit. They started it. That's what he's doing. They only care about free speech now because they're weak. Yes, I agree with you. But shouldn't we end by saying, regardless, the principle should be all that matters? You'd think so, wouldn't you? Well, what this does is leads people going, yeah, screw them. The left started it. They're hiding behind this because now, yes, probably, but we should care about it regardless, right? I'd like to believe actual patriots, actual people that want to make America great again would believe that. Emerald Robinson with 874,000 subscribers says, when the communists canceled me during the Biden regime, none of them stood up for free speech. Now that communists are getting canceled, they all claim they care about free speech. Make them live by their own rules. Cancel them now. Make fun of her. Guys, you don't, from, it's X, that makes sense. XOANN White House correspondent. Perfect. Guys, you have no principles, Emerald. You don't have any principles, or at least in this case, if you are literally saying, like, what did you do when they canceled you? You rightly called it out, and you said, that's a violation of my rights, didn't you? And so your answer to it is to do it back to them. It shows that you are weak and small and you have no principle. It makes me sad. Oh, this is good. Actually, I think, I'll show this from Shannon Joy in a minute. Some people have principles to call this out. See, like this person. They were all against free speech until now. Yes, good. We agree. Now, can you make the decision about free speech being censored now? No, they started it. So you're exactly the same as them. How does that make you feel? That you don't see it that way because you just simply pretend that they deserve to be censored. You see how dumb this gets? And look, even if you actually are, even if they do deserve to be censored, they have rights like everybody else. And that you don't agree to that or you don't want that to be the case just shows you where your principles lack. Cancel them now. Rob Schneider. Where were these self-righteous, phony free speech crying liberals when the Twitter files were revealed? Yeah, the Twitter screenshots. How'd that ever work out? What happened to the Pfizer ones? How are the Fauci files? We just went forward, guys. It's funny how often Elon Musk things happen like that. All the build and hype, and we get like a halfway in, and we just disappear and never talk about it again. Doge it's just so funny to me. But going forward, they didn't care then. Typical. And the Biden-Harris regime was proved to have censored Americans for opposing views. I agree. They were all cowardly silent. Okay. I agree, Rob. Where's the call for not doing the same thing back? The call seems to suggest that they deserve what they're getting right now. But I can't say for sure because he didn't make that, but others do. I'm just pointing out people that have been, self-prescribed champions of free speech against the left who now seem to be cheering on the same thing happening to them. Makes me sad. Elon Musk. Tara Bowl, of course, who made that long fake list of the new independent media, says, remember when they called for the president of the United States to lose his free speech? Same thing. Yes, and she did, and it's still up right now. Let's be honest. Donald Trump's Twitter account should be suspended. Yes, that'd be censorship. I agree. That's wrong. Call it out. The difference is they're not doing it now. The same point, guys. Same point. Elon Musk goes, like you're what? Like, obviously, you're just trying to propel this to 6 million views because you're divisive. You're trying to create exactly what we're always pointing out. Here is Mike Lee pointing out the tweet that's still there. And he says, this age like milk. Well, yes. Okay. We all agree. It's very tiresome. Yes. Anybody who's not a child agrees that we shouldn't be censoring people. Why are you guys doing it then? Why are you rationalizing that then? And this person says they don't understand how much we are laughing at their cries of censorship. See? And Mike Lee says self-awareness. You'd like to think maybe that's just a random comment. No, 3.1 thousand likes. Mike Lee comments and they're in agreement. So you're laughing because they're calling what you're doing out and you don't care? Yeah, so you guys are the same thing. You have no principles and you are just like them. As much as you'll probably never identify yourself as that, you are just as weak-willed in this position. Stand up for something. Have some, it frustrates me. I'm sure you can tell. By the way, Mike Lee is the one that posted something not too long ago that said, protecting pedophiles should not be accepted or something like that. Like, release the files. Don't protect pedophiles. And then just completely goes to the conversation when suddenly he wasn't supposed to talk about it anymore. Gotta love the partisan games, don't you? Oh, yeah. And let's not forget, as they're all screaming that this is supposed, well, it's okay. They started it. Let's not forget what Charlie Kirk's stance was. The person they're using to justify all of this.
Speech, and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie in our society.
Let's not forget as well that this is what Bondi just said, which is the identical statement from the left that the entire right, rightly so, fought against. Now, here she is, Charlie Kirk's name, the guy who you're going to hear next tell you that censorship and hate speech doesn't exist, censorship is bad. And they're using his name to censor hate speech. You almost can't make up a more stupid narrative, a stupid arc. They are bastardizing his memory. And yet they're going to attack people like me for simply being honest about how these things are. And look, there's, like I said, there's plenty of people out there that are just hardcore anti everything Charlie Kirk. And they have a right to be. There's plenty of things I align with, like I said before. But nonetheless, people will frame me as somehow the, borderline left terrorist because I'm simply saying things that in some cases might be perceived as being insulting. But it's just my opinion about him. And doing so and being honest about it is far more in honoring of his memory than what they're doing.
And there's hate speech, and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie in our society.
My position is that even hate speech should be completely and totally allowed in our country. The most disgusting speech should absolutely be protected. As soon as you use the word hate, that is a very subjective term. Because then all of a sudden it is in the eyes or it is in the implementation of whomever has the power.
Do you see more law enforcement going after these groups who are using hate speech and putting cuffs on people so we show them that some action is better than no action?
We will absolutely target you, go after you if you are targeting anyone with hate speech, anything. And that's across the aisle.
And so the minute that you start to enforce speech laws like they do in Europe based on specific political opinions, regardless of how reprehensible they are, then you actually give credence to them. Let me be very clear. Bring your bad ideas publicly so decent people can cross-examine you, so we can see who you are, we can talk to you, and convince the public otherwise.
There's free speech, and then there's hate speech. And there is no place, especially now, especially after what happened to Charlie in our society.
Oh, freedom of speech, freedom of speech. These are foolish people. We have a lot of foolish people.
Well, next is the recent part of this. I played it quick in the beginning. You might have missed it. Trump says, she brings up that Charlie didn't think there was hate speech because it's not a real thing, right? It's speech, which is protected. And then there's crimes you can commit, which have accountability and have a consequence. When they say hate speech, all they're doing is claiming that, or a hate crime, all they're really doing is just adding on intention that in most cases you can't even prove. But on top of that, the crime is still the crime that already has a listing consequence on the books. So they're just, and this is all political overlapping, guys, and they're using it to control speech and control ideas and to control you. But she says, Charlie said there is no hate speech, and Trump says he might not be saying that now. All these people pretending that they care about him, that they want to, praise his memory, are actually using him in the most disgusting ways. Whether or not again, regardless of my stance, which I already made clear, some agreed, some not. The idea of calling this out, like this is what Charlie would do. If you believe in those statements, the idea that there is no hate speech and the idea that they're now using him to drive in the idea that this has changed because of Charlie. They're using him as the martyr to shift in the thing that he was fighting into actual reality. I don't think Orwellian's the right word, but that's something in that ballpark. That's wild to me. And it should be insulting as hell to the people that are, his family, people that care about person. They people that actually believed in his ideas. And so I said, and these are the ones supposedly defending Charlie's memory. They're laughing at you.
That there was no such thing as hate speech. He obviously, no one anticipated what happened to Charlie, but you have always been. Charlie's.
Well, he might not be saying that now. Why? Why, Trump? Because emotion? Right? Because something bad happened? Well, that would mean there's no principle, right? Because the principle won't change because you're emotionally upset because something bad happens, something horrible, something terrible, something earth-shattering, doesn't matter. It doesn't change the principle. But what that shows you is that Trump either doesn't care about it in the first place or doesn't have any principles. Glenn says both parties always rethink speech the minute they get into power. In the US, you can almost always tell who is screaming about free speech, those who are out of power. He's absolutely right. I mean, it's like clockwork, guys. This is Republicans rethinking speech. It's just very transparent. It just goes back and forth. That's the point. And what it does is it creates the feeling that you're fighting the power, and then you get the momentum, and then you get to push back. And then, like what we're going to see after this one is that the left is to fight back against Trump's fascism, and it will drive in the left's power, and it will continue the same problem. That's that linear progression that we keep highlighting. Here, David Icke pointing out Alex Jones being a hypocrite. First, it's just this weird. Alex Jones just shares a weird clip of Jimmy Kimmel, shutting down a truck in a moving truck. Like, it's just petty, small nonsense. And Alex says Jimmy Kimmel constantly celebrated that when conservatives and populists were being censored. He did. Deplatformed and debanked. Right, I agree. Now he's experiencing the karma of a collapsing establishment facade. Now, of course, they're trying to play the game like this was totally just an organic thing because Jimmy sucks. Well, he does, and he is a manipulator. And I do think he's ridiculous. But that's not what actually happened. But David Icke says the same establishment that canceled the right is canceling the left. You just don't get it, Alex. Since when did two wrongs make a right? Well, you see, he doesn't care about that. He doesn't care about the principle. It's about dunking on the other side. So in regard to Jimmy Kimmel, let's start with this article from Ars Technica. And this is really important to set the tone for what really happened here. The evidence, it's just like every other part of these ridiculous partisan back and forth. The evidence is usually pretty clear, and it comes down to the narratives you'll battle over. It becomes impossible. The noise gets too crazy. After getting Jimmy Kimmel suspended, FCC chair threatens ABC's The View. So that's as of today. Just to start with that point, so they're already like the game is, it was an organic thing, and his numbers were bad, and the numbers were bad. But let's remember, these people are largely, like especially today, corporate media is largely, what's the word I'm looking for, subsidized by the government. I mean, they need these things because they're propaganda tools. Like I keep saying, Alex Jones has a shockingly larger audience than people like Kimmel. That's why I call him out. If you understand, at least, I don't know if you can believe it, or, who knows it's hard to verify stuff like this today, but the claim is going around that he had like 139,000 views on like one of his recent shows. I get more than that. I mean, that's crazy, so the idea is that Alex Jones, who is reaching, however many times more, that's the reason we call it corporate media, is because they're deceiving people on a mass scale. Well, that's why we call out his lies. It's not some petty divisional thing. It's about showing that him or anybody else with that much reach are deliberately deceiving you about very foundational things. But so this case, they lied about this, claiming it was they just did it because they hated him. Oh, but now it's happening to The View. But that's also totally organic and it doesn't connect, but it does. It's all happening through the administration. Carr appeared yesterday on one of the radio shows hosted by Scott Jennings, who describes himself as the last man standing athwart the liberal mob. Jennings asked Carr whether The View and the ABC programs violate FCC rules and made reference to President Trump calling NBC to cancel Fallon and Myers. Right, no big deal. Trump just said he has a right to say, well, yeah, he does, right? But the president of the United States calling on companies to do things, and then his very clear track record of literally strong-arming people into doing what he wants or shutting people down or shutting down funding because they don't agree with them or do something he doesn't ask for. It's not hard to see the air he's created where they will bow to what he says. But it goes way further than just that. But that alone would be enough to argue that this wasn't some organic move. But it says, quote, a lot of people think there are other shows on ABC that maybe run afoul of this more often. Oh, I didn't finish it. Oh, no, that's right. We're talking about a specific rule we'll get to. But he says other shows that may run afoul more often than Jimmy Kimmel. He says, I'm thinking specifically of The View. And President Trump himself has mentioned Jimmy Fallon and Seth Meyers as at NBC. Do you have comments on those shows, he says? And are they doing what Kimmel did Monday night? And is it even worse on those programs, in your opinion? So what the argument, I guess, is that he lied about whether the guy was MAGA. I mean, this is absolutely mind-blowing to me. That one, are we saying that somebody even deliberately lying on a media show is somehow now worthy of them to get them completely kicked off the... Okay, then that would mean every single platform that we're literally pointing to. Every one of them. Every single, from the media. It's insane to pretend that they don't already know that his job is to lie to you. So all they're really saying is that, we'll get to it because it's not saying it right here, but the argument going around is that he misrepresented that the guy was MAGA. Well, at right this moment, you can't prove one way or the other. There's data points, but it's not defined. He just seemed to lean into what he thought. And they remove him from, this is obvious to me. And it's if you can't see that whatever side it is, it's about being able to do this, whether media, whether talk shows, controlling the flow of information because you don't adhere to the narrative. That's left and right, guys. When he says, in response, Carr discussed the FCC's what's called the Equal Opportunities Rule, which I find humorous, talking about the Trump administration, also known as the Equal Time Rule. I would call it the propaganda rule, the fake illusion of equal, a little bit from them, a little bit from them. That's not journalism. That's a fake illusion. But it says, and could determine that those shows don't qualify for the exemption. And it says, when you look at these other TV shows, what's interesting is the FCC does have a rule called Equal Opportunity Rule, which means, for instance, if you're in the run-up to an election and you have one partisan elected official on, that you have to give equal time, equal opportunity to the opposing partisan politician, which is just insane to me. I get the idea that you want to so they can't just only sell you on one side, but that's what already happens, guys. So this is a way that you're sort of forcing them to pretend to be balanced. How about you just let people be what they be and then let people decide what actually is it's fair, an actual market. But it goes on to say, at another point in the interview, Carr said broadcasters that object to FCC enforcement can turn over your license to the FCC and we'll find something else with it. So even right there, floating soft threats about whether you comply with what they want from you. And it says, Carr said the FCC hasn't previously enforced the rule on those shows because of an exemption for what they call a bona fide news programs. He said the FCC could determine the shows mentioned by Jennings aren't exempt. Right. We could decide to determine that they're not in that because you want to use it against them. It says there's an exemption that rule called the bona fide rule exemption, which means if you are a bona fide news program, which is subjective, you don't have to abide by the equal opportunity rule, which is what they allow for Fox and CNN and all the rest. It says over the years, the FCC has developed a body of case law that has suggested that most of these late night shows, other than Saturday Night Live, are bona fide news programs. Even though Saturday Night Live does not give, as far as I can tell, equal opportunity, but it says, I would assume you could make the argument that The View is a bona fide news show. I would laugh at that, but that's probably the case on record. But I'm not so sure about that, it says. And I think it's worthwhile to have the FCC look into whether The View and some of these other programs you still qualify as bona fide news programs are therefore exempt from this. Now, here's what's interesting. The only reason that would matter is if you then argue that they're not doing so, right? That they're only showing you left views, which I think is clear about all of these platforms. But this is where it gets even more interesting. It says an FCC fact sheet explains that stations giving time to one candidate must provide comparable time and placement to the others. It says the onus is on the candidate to request that time. The station is not required to seek out opposing legally qualified candidates and offer them time. If this comes to pass where the view is removed, and we're going to get to Kimmel after in the same conversation, what's interesting to me, I'm willing to bet you anything that this nuance will get ignored, right? They'll just remove the view, they'll cite this as why, and then just never try to verify that it was actually the case, especially since this becomes even more relevant right here. It says the View has addressed its attempts to actually get Trump on the show. And it says executive producer Brian Teta told Deadline, of course, they could be lying, but this makes sense to me. In April 2024, it says, quote, we invited Trump to join us at the table for both 2016 and 2020 elections, which I argue that's in their interest, right? It would be wildly popular, even just to hate on Trump. And it says, and he declined. At a certain point, we stopped asking. Okay, so how much you want to bet now they can turn around and say, they didn't invite me on, frame it as they only have lefties on, even though they're claiming at least, and that would be worth proving that they did try and he didn't even want it. And all I'm pointing at is kind of building for if this comes to pass, which I kind of get the sense that it will because of where it already started, that this is going to be worth knowing when this partisan chaos story breaches the, whatever you would call trying to give a bad analogy there about the water, but it says the Kimmel controversy erupted over a monologue in which he said, quote, we hit some new lows over the weekend with the MAGA gang desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered Charlie Kirk as anything other than one of them, and with everything they can to score political points from it. How is that even possible? I mean, that is identical to every other partisan conversation with different layers. I mean, are we seriously? That you can argue even if he did lie, what if he was just mistaken? But I do know these people lie to you. As a matter of this is what they do. My point is that so does every one of them. That's what they're there for, guys. And so it's just crazy to me that you can even make that the case. And on top of that we don't even know for sure that he is one or the other. That is the reality of the evidence, unless something shifted in the last couple hours. There's data points on either side, like the MAGA family, or that he lives with this person, but we can't prove that. And he has yet to confess. He's yet to give much of an information other than saying his name in regard to that hearing. So how in the world are they able to fire him based on the idea that he lied about something we don't even know for sure? This is ideological purity test here stuff. This is crazy. And it says, with accused murderer Tyler Robinson being described as having liberal views, Carr and other conservatives alleged that Kimmel misled viewers. Seriously. Carr appeared on right-wing commentator Benny Johnson's podcast, of course, and said, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. These companies can find ways to change conduct, to take action, frankly, on Kimmel, or there's going to be additional work for the FCC. That's a threat. So they responded. If you're too childish to point out that that's how this went, then you're just a dishonest person. They said, take easy or hard, your choice. And they said, oh, okay, well, we don't want to go through the hard way because we've seen how petty and divisive and what's the right word for it? Just the Trump administration will go after people for the smallest of things in ways that are frankly illegal and don't seem to care. But it's worked for them because everyone bows to their interest now because they know they're going to do something if they don't. But it goes on. Nexstar and Sinclair, they put out public statements. It says the two major owners of the TV stations both urged ABC to take action. So you see how this starts. They say, do it, or we're going to do something. They say, ABC, do something. Okay. And it said, and realize his numbers have been low for a long time. So you could argue that's plays a factor, but this was the catalyst no matter how you try to spin it. And he says the pressure from broadcasters is happening at a time when both Nexstar and ABC owner Disney are seeking Trump administration approval for mergers. Of course, that plays a factor, right? So it's very clear. Here's Brandon Carr, September 18th. He says broadcast TV stations have always been required by their licenses to operate in the public interest. That includes serving the needs of their local communities. And broadcasters have long retained the right to not air national programs that they believe are inconsistent with the public interest, including their local community's values. I'm glad to see that many broadcasters are responding to their viewers as intended. See, this is what they're pointing to, and he put it out for a reason. Are we ignoring that he just said do something or I'm going to? And then said, good for them taking action because nobody asked them to. It's just a game they play. And all the lying partisans come out and pretend like they don't know it. It's a game. Every side does it. But here's what he said back in 2022. President Biden is right. Political satire is one of the oldest and most important forms of free speech. It challenges those in power with using humor to draw more people into the discussion. That's why people in influence positions have always targeted it for censorship. Now, whether you think it's satire or not, I don't think it was necessarily satire, but the show is a talk show. It's irrelevant. Even if he was lying about that, he has every right to say that is actual free speech. And now that we can see clearly that the government pressured this into reality, that's actual censorship, government censorship. But it's a nuance. They're going to say, no, he just said what he thought and they acted on their own accord. Sure. Easy to make that the case when it's obviously something that brushes up against your hypocrisy. Now you got people like libs of TikTok saying, fact check. Don't you love that? So now you're Snopes, right? It says, didn't they make fun of the fact check thing and now they're doing it? Did Trump fire Jimmy Kimmel? ABC did. Who is saying Trump fire? I mean, this is the game, right? You then point to other ridiculous partisan people in Congress or people in positions of political influence. Like this is the game. That's where I talk about the mainstream alternative media and the mainstream media pointing at each other. Like that's the whole conversation. It's exactly like this. Libs, well, who knows? I don't have a high opinion of their intelligence, but I'd like to believe they're aware of people like me. They're out here going, it's neither, right? So they point to the other ridiculous side of the partisanship and go, they claim Trump did it. Well, that's dumb to say because Trump, you could argue that the FCC chair did, yes. And Trump put him there, yes. But to say then Trump did that is just more abstract. You're broadening it out even further. That's what partisans do. They said ABC did. Telling the truth is hard for Democrats. Well, see, you also have a problem with the truth. And you can listen to the clip right here. This is where he was on Benny Johnson, and it was exactly what we just read to you. We could do it the easy way or the hard way. And it says, Chaya, and remember, Chaya was one of the ones that got those fake Epstein binders and then pretended like everything was good. Says, I know truth and facts are really hard for you, but when the federal government pressures a TV network, not only to censor speech, but to fire someone simply because it dislikes what he said, that's not overreach. It's a direct violation of the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, right? But you frame it like this, that's why they do it. It's a cartoon, and it's easy to point to. Well, here's somebody saying, well, tell it to Grok, honey. And this is what Grok said. Not that you should blindly listen to Grok, but it's the point was that the lie and this oversimplification, and even Grok says, yes, the FCC chair, Brendan Carr, a Trump appointee, pressured ABC by publicly threatening regulatory action. You already know this. I'm sure they'll update Grok again, however that goes. Here's Turnbull pointing to Tim Pool doing his old stupid dance. ABC is a private company and can do what it wants. Yes, we all agree with that. You're so measured, right? That's not what actually happened, though. Bud, take a seat. And Turnbull says, listen up, MAGA morons. ABC did not cancel Jimmy Kimmel because they received millions of letters from angry viewers that love Charlie Kirk. ABC canceled him because the FCC threatened to pull the broadcasting license. That's textbook censorship. I agree. Now, you could argue it's both. Maybe it is. But you can't pretend like the government doing what they did just doesn't exist. Shannon Joy. That's what she posted underneath below. Riley Gaines says Jimmy Kimmel gets canceled by ABC and the left instantly blames Trump and MAGA. You see? Now, that is the fake version of it. That's the team sport politics left, making it about only Trump because that's nothing that will ever hold up in court. That's something that's actually not true. There's more abstract points to be made. But yeah, maybe Trump was involved. But see, this is what they do. So then people on the right read this and go, that's so stupid. But the only people saying that are people like Rachel Maddow, right? That's the game that's being played. I don't know whether Riley knows that or not. I'm not sure. But Riley or Shannon Joy says, hey, Riley, because Trump's FCC commissioner, this is not the same one. That one's coming up. But she says, because Trump's FCC commissioner, Brendan Carr, publicly threatened ABC affiliates with fines and yanking their broadcast license for carrying his show. Can you watch the clip below? So the networks were actually under duress. Right? See, some people have principles enough to point out the obvious. Here is Piers Morgan. Fairweather Morgan, as we call him. Jimmy Kimmel has celebrated endless conservative stars cancellations with savage glee. Oh, you're so brave. You're so, what's the word? He's just trying to frame himself. Like he sees them doing that on the right and he wants to be in the clique. You're just a clown, man. Yes, good. Yes, we all agree. Left sucks. They did that. Now have some courage, some constitution, some gumption. Stand up and say, and they're doing it too. That would make you real. Not you just fair weather sidling up to whatever team is certainly winning in your eyes. Pathetic. He really is. Like, I find him more offensive to me. I guess wrong word, like more repugnant or not even that. Like, I find him worse in every way than even the people out there that are just like blindly telling the lies. Like he's like worming into there and acting like he's seeing and giving you some level of truth and then being, fanning the flames of the problem. And look, I agree. Jimmy Kimmel celebrated Tucker getting fired. Yes, he also pushed vaccines on people. I think he's a ridiculous person. Doesn't change the reality of the law, the constitutional rights, and the hypocrisy of what's happening right now. Piers Morgan said Jimmy Kimmel lied about Charlie Kirk's assassination being MAGA. See, Piers is an idiot. Okay, he said what he thought was the case, or he lied. Either way, you can't prove one way or the other. And it says this caused understandable outrage all over America, prompted TV station owners to say they wouldn't air him. He's now been suspended by his employers. Why is it being heralded by some free speech martyr? See, Piers Morgan doesn't even take a second to look into the facts, or he didn't even care because he's selling you a narrative. Glenn says because Piers, it wasn't some autonomous decision by ABC or affiliates to remove him. The chair of the FCC explicitly threatened media outlets with reprisals if they didn't remove him. You just can't ignore that. And Champagne Jossie says this shouldn't be hard to understand. And here's the exact post from Sinclair. He says, I get it that everyone's pissed right now, but when media corporations use government muscle to police speech, it sets a precedent far more dangerous than anything the late night show should say. Right? Principle. Support people like this. Whether or not you agree everything, seems like Joss and I are pretty much in line with most points, but whether you agree with them or not, people that show principled stances should gain your support. Not people like this that are fair weather. There's Glenn Beck again. Kimmel's show didn't collapse because the FCC conspiracy. It collapsed because audiences walked away. Yeah, so you're a liar then, or completely inept at your job. You choose. You can't ignore it. Either he didn't look and he's bad at his job, or he knowingly is misleading you for a partisan side. That's the game today. Here's Glenn again, citing Philip, saying this is a business consequence in regard to the same post. Nothing to do with rights or free speech. He lied, misled people about the assassin. Same point. That's just not the case right now. You can't prove one way or the other. He says talking is going to definitely produce copycats. He's deserved to have his late show pulled. Copycats? You mean media people misleading you? No, I mean, guys, it's like this is almost embarrassing for people like on the right who just to claim like him misleading you is like the pinnacle end all. Like, okay, let's go with it then. What about Fox? What about everything they said today all over the shows that I can prove to you are false? What about all over CNN? What about American One News? What about OAN? Yes, I can prove to you they've lied, like knowingly lied, but they don't care about the lies. They care about using the claim of the lie to go after someone they don't like. Here's the White House account. Like, I swear, this is so embarrassing. Here's what they wrote. They're embarrassing themselves every day. All of them are acting like they're like in some kind of right-wing chat room when they talk on here. It's just embarrassing. POTUS was right again, says the White House account. Kimmel was sidelined because his show sucked. It's funny to me. Like, they're just children. Like, it's not like I think it did suck, but it's just funny to me there's just no decorum. Like, it's like you're talking to some Doge person running, when Doge was existing, like some 16-year-old kid that he hired. That's probably the people like, it doesn't even matter. His show sucked. That's why. Yeah, but the point is that's also incorrect for why it happened. His show did suck and his numbers were down, but that's not actually why this started. It's because of the FCC. You can easily prove that. Here's Marjorie Taylor Greene. Democrats want to subpoena FCC Chair Brendan Carr because they're upset that their actions finally have consequences. See, she's part of the problem, guys. I'm sorry to say that if you thought because she pointed out what's Israel, you can't look at this and not. I think what this is transparently obvious. And all of them are taking a very hardcore partisan one-sided perspective on this, which shows you they have no principle. Oh, come on. Oh, here, hold on. I've got it right here.
I would like to move to table the motion to subpoena. Jimmy Kimmel was fired because he lied on ABC about the identity of the.
Okay, see, right out of the gate. Did he? Can you prove that? Just because your side of the narrative screams that we know for a fact that he is based on your opinion? I've already shown you the evidence, guys. There is nothing other than those subjective points. Look, he wore a mask. Look, he's dating a trans person, if you can even verify that. He hated Trump. Well, every single one of those things, I can point out Republicans that have done them or do them all collectively. Maybe it's not the majority, but you just can't. Or how about the idea that his family was all MAGA, right? That there was a very clear right-leaning point, or that he was in a right-wing style chat room with the memes he shared. I wouldn't argue that that proves that he's right-wing, because I understand that there's more overlap than people want to acknowledge. But people like this they must know they're lying to you, or she's watching idiots like Benny Johnson and believing that he's honest, or that his subjective framing is complete fact, which is also very alarming. But I'll play it all the way through. Listen to this. And even the way that she like reiterates all the buzzwords very clear and uses the word martyr, by the way, because that is currently one of the points they're supposed to put out there.
I would like to move to table the motion to subpoena. Jimmy Kimmel was fired because he lied on ABC about the identity of the man that Tyler Robinson that assassinated, martyred Charlie Kirk. He lied and said he was MAGA.
Well, she's lying right now. So get out of Congress.
Tyler Robinson was not MAGA.
I'm kidding.
Not one bit. He was part of Antifa.
Oh, really?
He was in a relationship.
Now he's part of Antifa. Oh, great. Good. Just see, they do the same thing every time. Have you proven that? Or are you just saying, well, because he wrote fascist, bad fascist on his gun, that means he's part of a group, right? You guys can't be the ones that are saying that this is an organized, funded, specific terrorist cell, and then say that anyone who screams things about fascism is also part of that organized team that has to sign up. Like every day they do this. You can't. Those things are completely contradictory. People can claim that, like, I can say people are fascist without being a part of a group that pretends to be anti-fascist, because clearly what they act through are fascist tendencies. Either way, she's just making things up, screaming that he's part of a group. Why? Because they declared it a terrorist group, because there is an obvious partisan agenda that is running all through this thing.
Not one bit. He was part of Antifa. He was in a relationship. He was in a relationship with someone who identified as furry and trans. And
based on things that we're going through chat rooms and FBI and so on. But overall, neither of those things prove somebody has a specific political standing. They just don't. Yes, I agree. They show certain leanings, very much so.
And this is an absurd lie. And so I moved to table the motion to subpoena.
Right. So what I get all the time in this is kind of like honestly, even from people in our circle sometimes, right? Anybody honest is going to agree that being objective, you don't know for sure. You just don't. Even if they were actually part of Antifa, you still wouldn't prove that you know that they have a certain political leaning. You have to be honest about that. But see, the point is that people go, come on, Ryan, you don't know. I can agree. It's maybe 90% likely. But you see how important it is today to make sure that we're not being subjective, even when it's most likely, because it's not in your interest. And that small 10% variable is what they dive on. Like, that is their bread and butter, guys. Err on the side of your principles every single day. It has to be the focal point right now. So this is another very interesting one. Oh, two more, and then there's a couple more points on this. Here's Senator Rand Paul. The First Amendment says nothing about private companies firing people who say despicable things. Yeah, that's a fact. We all agree. But he says, I agree with Sinclair on this, but it's absolutely wrong for the FCC to get involved. Now, I wish he would have been a little more specific about that, because the point is, yes, the FCC did drive this action. Therefore, it's not the first part, right? I mean, the first part exists within it, but it started because the FCC drove it into reaction. So, excuse me. So you have to acknowledge that that's government driving the censorship. So I'm glad he at least can point to that, because it seems very difficult for Republicans to be honest about that right now. Wesley Hunt. This person says 412,000 followers. Spare us the pearl clutching on Jimmy Kimmel. When conservatives were censored, you know where this is going. Shadow banned, deplatformed. The left smirked and called it consequence culture. Yeah, because they're ridiculous, right? So we agree. That was childish and small and stupid, and it's ridiculous and it's unconstitutional, right, Wesley? We all agree. But now their own reckless rhetoric, the lies and demonization that fueled the assassination of Charlie Kirk, is finally under a spotlight. Oh, again, because people called Trump fascist, therefore we know that's why Sheila got shot, because that's a smart thing to say, even though I'll show you the clips of Trump calling her a fascist. These people are ridiculous. When he says, let's be clear, this isn't cancel culture. These are the consequences they demanded. Oh, okay, so Wesley's also a clown. Also somebody who just literally said bad, 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 and here's why we're doing it too, but it's okay. How does anybody take somebody like that seriously? They built the game, they wrote the rules, and for the first time, they're being forced. Okay, fine. So just admit that you don't care about the principle. Don't start off claiming like you care about free speech when your response is, we're going to stop theirs. They started it. Go back to kindergarten, man. This is insane. It's insulting that people are acting like this is a responsible adult thing to say. This, Representative Wesley Hunt, excuse me, these are people that swore an oath to the Constitution, who are literally going, they started it, so who cares? Do I need to say any more? I really would like to believe that that would just be, I mean, we should, every one of these should be some kind of like watershed moment. But no, we're trapped in the partisan manipulation. Here was the one. Now, this is super interesting to me. Now, I'll play it first, and I'll give you my comments. I really genuinely think, though, that this is the reality behind all of them trying to pretend like they're being nuanced. You'll see what I mean.
What we did in canceling Jimmy Kimmel is hypocritical. We talk about free speech, and
I'm sorry, there's a curse for those that want to, for the families out there watching.
We did in canceling Jimmy Kimmel is hypocritical. We talk about free speech, and then when someone says something we don't like, we cancel them. It's not consistent with our values.
He's right. 100% right. Everyone knows that. And he's admitting it. And then he says this.
And I don't give a fuck. Fuck you. You kicked me in the balls, I gouge out your fucking eyes. I'm not doing some Dave Portnoy explanation on why this is consistent. It's hypocritical. We're hypocritical. This is a fucking war.
Told you.
Fuck you. You got me fired, I get you fired. It's like I say to my daughter's boyfriend.
Your child.
You make her cry, I make you cry. We're making you cry now, motherfuckers. This is who post-Molly Jimmy needs to suffer. And we're making him fucking suffer. And we're going to make them all suffer. The gloves are off. We're hypocrites now. You made your bed. You're fucking lying in it. And other colloquialisms such as that.
You know what I genuinely think about this is that I think this is an example of somebody who drinks the Kool-Aid. Truly believes not just out there trying to use the partisan to, she's not a loomer out there secretly fighting for Zionism, right? Whatever you want to look at. I think that's a bad example because I think she also drinks her own BS. My point, though, is that I think he believes these things. And so he's out there feeling like they did it first, so screw them. Everyone can understand the logic there. You could even argue they deserve it. The point, though, is that I think this is an example of a person who genuinely believes this, and so he's just being honest. And what he's doing is I'm not going to be like I'm not going to be like all those pretenders over there who are knowingly pretending this is not hypocritical. You see my point, guys? Because it is hypocritical. And we all know that. Anymore, the brain can see that they're doing the same thing. Ron Paul, why would right cancel culture be okay? They're like, that's not what we're doing. Even though they're going, but they deserve it. They started it. So at the very least, I'll say that I would give him more respect for at least being honest about his opinions. At least I can engage with that. But my point overall is that that's what's happening. That now it's becoming praised because if you've been watching my show, we've been making this point for, a long time, but a lot since Trump came into power recently. That the might makes right. The kind of rationale of undermining your own rights. Just like this. Because they're bad, right? Even if it makes you feel better for the moment. What you're doing is allowing the government to rationalize not caring, not acknowledging or respecting your inherent rights. Not this side, not the other side. So what are you going to do when they come back around and say, okay, well, we're going to do it again because you kept doing it. Even though it was already going on, all you're doing is normalizing, which they were already going to do, the cycle that never ends. So if people like him or us wanted to actually fight for free speech and actually stop the government or maybe just the left, do you think that's the problem? Is the answer to keep going with the problem? Or is the answer to go, okay, fine, they're bad, we get it, they deserve it, but we're going to be higher than that. We're going to do the right thing. Actually fight for free speech because that's what we pretend we're doing on this show, right? No. This is about petty, small attacks on the other side because that's all they seem to care about. That's sad, man. Even if every single thing they ever said about the left, even if they're actually some domestic terrorist organization, the answer is not to undermine your own structure. It's pure stupidity. Arrest them. Charge them with crimes. This is weaponized against you. And people like this are now pushing out, but at least I feel like he's being honest about it, but he's creating the justification for people to go, yeah, you know what? Screw it. They deserve it. Wait till it comes back to bite you in the ass.
Cry. We're making you explanation on why this is consistent. It's hypocritical. We're hypocritical. This is a fucking war.
Yeah, and you've heard that from all of them. The moment this happened, it was a war. And of course, it's all their fault for incitement. But it's not meant to be another partisan. The point is, if you're watching this show, that it happens from every partisan team sport political side. And then, of course, Trump floats pulling licenses of networks that are against him if Jimmy Kimmel's suspended, or after Jimmy Kimmel's suspended. So how are you going to pretend that this was some organic thing when it's already being floated about The View and they're already saying other people are against it? You know this is the reality if you're not blinded by partisanship. And the left does the same thing. Here's Glenn saying, if you want to defend the events leading to Kimmel's suspension, you can obviously do so. But be honest about what happened. The triggering event, the central fact, the FCC chair, Brendan Carr, explicitly threatened stations with state reprisals if they continued to air Kimmel. It's cut and dry, printed right there. As for this painful, absurd claim that Carr has the power to ban network shows that spread false claims, please. The entire conservative censorship critique has been we don't have a ministry of truth. The state doesn't decide truth or falsity, right, guys? Carr himself argued that. This is how painful this gets, guys. It's just so insanely hypocritical. And people that were, you know what it is really that bothers me the most is it's the people like the Ben Johnsons and Nick Sorters that are out there acting virtuous and righteous about these points and then are the first ones to challenge it. The first ones to go, yeah, screw the left, and do the same thing back. It's pathetic. Oh, wait, hold on. There's one other point in that. He goes on to say, if you really believe that Brendan Carr, or more accurately, Trump, can just sit in front of their TV watching shows and then ban any program the minute they hear something they think is false or constitutes disinformation, then you think like Nina Jankowicz does. I mean, he is ripping them apart, guys. I mean, that's exactly what they were calling out. You know the points. I don't even explain it. It's the same thing on the left because it's the same thing from your government. And so now they're just going, I mean, think about the way he framed that, because that's how it would work. So when the next Democrat administration comes into power, they're going to be able to just go, that's not true, censored. I mean, how was that even possibly in line with what they said they were fighting for? They're destroying their own credibility in the minds of anybody with a brain for what? Glenn says the exact Carr quote where he very explicitly threatens all stations that continue to air Jimmy Kimmel's show with official state reprisals. And one can find Charlie Kirk's assassination horrifying and also object to this. They're not mutually exclusive. And again, we went over, you can see very clearly, I read it in the first article. Hard way or the easy way. We're going to go after them. So Omar El Ayat says, this is the 6th time Randy Fine has been on CNN since June without being challenged on his frequent bigoted and genocidal remarks. Now, I'm not going to skip this because I've gone longer than I wanted today. And this guy's just an absolute disgusting, vile person. I mean, you could look at these comments he makes. You know, it says Fine has called Tlaib a terrorist who shouldn't be American. He said Tlaib and Omar, Minnesota might be leaving before I go to Congress. Bombs away. We're talking about American citizens, for crying out loud. He has advocated running over, killing pro-Palestine protesters, called Palestinians animals, referred to Muslims as rapists, as of late openly cheerleads starving civilians in Gaza. In his most recent online tirade on Friday, Fine once again engaged in a racist attack on Representative Tlaib, posting on Twitter in response to her condemning Israel's starvation of Gaza. Tell your fellow Muslim terrorists to release the hostages and surrender. Until then, starve away. Insane. The idea clearly is that we can prove 100 times over, and before I even said this, that they're deliberately holding back this problem. And even Trump has alluded to that now. But Randy Fine doesn't care because he's not fighting for American interests. The clip is basically him trying to gaslight around this whole thing and saying, you know, Kimmel basically saying Kimmel legitimized violence, and then he gets pushed back and he goes, well, he didn't really, but the words he meant, wink, wink, lead to violence. Oh, you mean just like the left said? Oh, so words are violence. Okay. Good job, Randy Fine. You're a moron. Sean Strickland says, unpopular take, but the FCC overstepped with Jimmy Kimmel. He didn't get canceled. ABC was threatened by FCC. It's the same point, but you're getting people calling this out all over the place. Sean Strickland, 690,000 followers, MMA, his reach. No pun intended. The UFC King says, facts, they're going to do this to everyone now. F Jimmy Kimmel, but this is not freedom. See, I believe this is most people. They just don't, not everyone has a reach or a voice. And you're only seeing this. Let me see this one though. Yeah, 905 followers. I see this because he's commenting under Sean. The point though is that a lot of average people are just like, yeah, Jimmy sucks, but that's not the Constitution. You know, it's like I'd like to believe at the very least, and I do believe that most people see that, but are just afraid to point it out. Like with COVID, for example, they were afraid to be called out by their side. This was what we pointed to earlier. Shannon Joy says, some on the right, being tired of having their speech infringed on by the left, have decided that what's good for the goose is good for the gander. The previous cries of infringement on speech have been replaced with cheers as they try to be clever on how it's different. And that's deliberately, I agree. It's a definitive fact. That's what she writes. That's the quote was from an article. And it says, Trump's FCC threatened affiliates, as we just read, brute force, censorship, and MAGA is cheering for Trump's bravado. Great write-up by Instigator 2024. Now, I might go through this. We should do this pretty quick. I'm really much longer than I wanted today. Congressman Byron Donalds says Rashida Tlaib has no point to make. She called Republicans fascist again. I mean, I get you'd like to think that they're smarter than this. Like, can't you guys recognize that we know that the word fascist has been thrown around by both sides for a long time? And so if you're making this big movement about how claiming they're fascist is why the violence happened, well, then we're going to point out that, look, he said the same thing. You're an idiot, right? I mean, it's just lazy. But he said she used the exact same irresponsible rhetoric that inspired Tyler Robinson to kill Charlie, meaning calling him a fascist. Enough is enough. Okay, well, I said, you mean like when Trump and others did below? Are you dishonest or just stupid? I, for one, care about free speech. I guess you don't. In case you missed it, here's Donald Trump, which he has a right to say. It's free speech. But if the argument is because they said it, that caused violence, then what's the case here, guys?
American politics today is between these far-left fascists led by Harris and her group. We have a fascist person running who's incompetent.
The only reason he even called her a fascist is because he was being called a fascist. As David Icke pointed out, communism and fascism are basically the same thing when it comes down to the core outcome. Like the reality of the main point of the overlap of business and government. So he's just calling her that because, yeah, you could argue that, but they're both fascist. They're both acting out fascist, communist, socialist policies when you really break down the full picture.
She's a Marxist, communist, fascist, socialist. She's not actually a socialist. She's gone past that. Somebody's got to explain this woman. There's a radical left Marxist, communist, fascist.
You know, it's just so silly. But they're going to town, really pushing it in because they think they're getting political points from it. This is Byron Donalds. It's been 8 days since the leftist assassin shot my friend Charlie Kirk. Now, did he even know Charlie? Everyone out there, maybe did, but it's just grossing me out how everyone now, we're all best friends and we love him to death and we were fighting the whole time, even though many of them were calling him out and Ben Shapiro called him a clown. Laura Loomer said he wasn't part of MAGA and he was a disgrace. Now we fight for his memory. They're disgusting. This is just now. And by the way, also calling for censorship using his memory, even though he didn't want that. He says, just now, Rashida Tlaib just called us a fascist again. Rhetoric is wrong, unhinged. Okay, then what about Trump then? You know, it's just the same point. But here's what she said, just so you can hear it. And it breaks down and so you know, in case you're missing this, I have no respect for any of these people. I've called out their hypocrisy, especially when it comes to pretending to fight for Israel, or rather for Palestine, and then in many cases continuing to fund Israel. Each one of them have had their hypocritical moments, and I think it's worth pointing out. But what this is about, what they break out into in the screaming match is embarrassing. But just so you can hear oh, you know what? Maybe I didn't grab it. We're rushing out the end anyway. The point is, she says he's a fascist pretty calmly, and he interrupts and goes, "Oh, dare you, the fascist," and not in like any outrageous way, but just interrupts her and says, "How dare you call us fascist?" And like pushes back and makes a big standing at. First of all, they are not just right. The government is acting fascistically wherever you look, and it's been happening for a long time. Maybe she doesn't know that. So call her one too. It's irrelevant. It's not some incitement to violence. It's an obvious reality of what's happening. Also, Trump called them all fascists too. So you really can't play this game anymore. It's embarrassing, but they're all pushing it. Here is Wesley Hunt again. President Obama has no moral high ground. For over a decade, Democrats and their media allies have censored, vilified, targeted conservatives. Yes, I agree. So therefore, do it back? It's sad. Here, Byron Donalds. For years, the left has defamed us fascists, and that exact rhetoric inspired Tyler Robinson. So what's this, like the 17th time he posted the exact same thing today? Why? You know why. Same thing. Of course, don't forget that this is the guy who called for involuntary euthanization, killing of homeless people. And then, of course, in a very, very embarrassing and clumsy way, tried to make it sound like he just called for them to be, like what I forget the way he framed it. So to be clear, he said I have it. I forgot. Here he is. And I simply said, I can't believe this is real. Here's what he said. That's the same guy in that interview. Oh, and I was going to play a quick part of it. So watch. Here's the quick opening. Just watch the way he responds to this. Before this clip, this other one, and it's just like the way he laughs at it.
And I think it's really important we need to stand.
Oh, okay, there it is. Sorry. So it's both. I forgot. So it's this, and then they talk. So here's the first part of this.
And I think it's really important we need to stand up against this fascist takeover. That's not a bad word. It's a fact.
Do I look like a member of the Third Reich to you, Mr.?
A member of the Third Reich? Is this guy that stupid? Or no, probably not. He probably just knows what he's doing, which is about trying to conflate the whole thing. So the only fascists ever have been Nazis? It's just stupid. It's reductive. It's ridiculous. No, people can be fascist because they act in a fascist way. And obviously what's happening in the government between Biden and Trump and others is clearly like that.
Is that what I look like to you?
You're the one taking your voting card.
Is that what you think? Is that what you think?
Yuck.
Is that what you think?
Yuck. Both of them. Yuck. They're both disgusting. Like that's childish and small. Show some decorum. Talk about, it's embarrassing to Americans. They're doing it for points, guys. That's what they're both doing it for the same reason. And both are ridiculous. Acting like it's only the one side, acting like she's being outrageous by pointing it out. They're both ridiculous. And it's just hard to watch. It goes on for a minute and it's embarrassing. Way out of line. So stupid. And here, this is what I wanted to show you. The way he responds to it.
Your thoughts? I thought she was insane, to be perfectly honest with you. And look, especially with what we know about this shooter that assassinated Charlie Kirk, the left has been using this vitriol against Republicans, against MAGA, because they have no policies that actually work. Their policies are quite stupid. They don't work. They don't hurt people. And because they don't have...
Oh, they don't hurt people. Oops. I think you meant the opposite, right?
Vitriol against Republicans, against MAGA, because they have no policies that actually work. Their policies are quite stupid. They don't work. They don't hurt people.
Oh, okay. So you could take that by him saying they don't work because they don't hurt people, meaning that their policies are trying to hurt people. I obviously think he misspoke, but maybe it's a little bit Freudian. You can read into all you want. I don't think that's the point, but I think it's interesting that the idea is that what they're doing both ways in every which way is leading to your subjugation, your removal of rights, your surveillance. So, I don't think the left is I think it's all part of the same game. So the point really is to laugh at his slip. But what's your point? What's your evidence? It's all subjective. They're bad and evil and they don't understand and they're stupid. And it's like, these are supposed to be people running things. Come on, guys. These are people that have Zionist funding. That's what they have. I don't even think they understand what's happening right now. But this clip. So the guy with the interview, don't forget that he said this and then tried to lie about it.
They have given billions of dollars to mental health and the homeless population. A lot of them don't want to take the programs. A lot of them don't want to get the help that is necessary. You can't give them a choice. Either you take the...
Which is insane, first of all. So they don't have a choice now. Why? Because they don't want, look, homeless for whatever reason, it's not all because they're just lazy, despite the way that Republicans like to frame that. There's a ton of reasons that come from government action and a bunch of other reasons, including pharmaceuticals and a whole bunch of things. Either way, you can't give them a choice. Why? Because they're homeless? Do they just know they don't have rights anymore? Well, it's the same thing when they just kind of move them out of these areas. Of course, when they're an area, well, there's a whole conversation about freedom of movement, whatever else, but if you want to pretend that they just have to own these lands and they move them out of the way, what they're doing is treating them like they're meaningless. People have different opinions on everything about that. But the idea I'm pointing out is the forcing of it. Why does that make sense to anybody? Because they're othered, because they're not part of society. They're human beings and they have rights like anybody else. But the next part's even crazier.
You can't give them a choice. Either you take the resources that we're going to give you, or you decide that you're going to be locked up in jail. That's
not move. Take what we're going to give you or go to prison. But freedom though. Hashtag freedom. You know, these people are ridiculous.
The way it has to be now.
Or involuntary lethal injection.
Yep.
Involuntary lethal injection. Yep. Yep.
Locked up in jail. That's the way it has to be now.
Or involuntary lethal injection or something. Just killed.
I just love that. The guy's like, yo, what? Like he immediately responds as, yeah. And then you could look at his eyes and he's like, did he just say that? Involuntary lethal injection. He tried to pretend like he didn't say involuntary. He did. These people are insane. And I mean left and right, as you well know. So we also have, so it's weird how they've weirdly fixated on AOC, Elon, and TLAV all in like the last 24 hours. And Stephen Miller. They are endlessly inciting violence. Okay, let's listen to what she said. And what he says is inciting violence.
I do believe those of you who are interested in rewriting this hateful man's history are full of shit.
Thank you.
You could argue that's insulting, sure. But what he said, case it's too low.
Those of you who are interested in
Those of you who are interested in rewriting this hateful man's history are full of SHIT. So she's not allowed to have an opinion about his ideas if she disagrees with them or if she dares to say that they're racist or divisive. Do you realize half the people everywhere that have that opinion? So what's your argument? That because she's in a position of power that she's not allowed to be honest about that? Or that she's not allowed to call people out because they're doing something that she thinks is wrong? Or is your entire premise that she's making all of it up because Democrat? Well, then fine, then prove that. Like, it's just crazy. But Stephen Miller, he doesn't care about any of it. He cares about destroying this country. That's what I see very clearly, but that's my opinion. Either way, Stephen Miller wants you to believe that simply saying that you shouldn't try to rewrite the person's history because they're dead, which is what we all have said in the past about plenty of people in the past, like John McCain, for example, that's endlessly inciting violence. I mean, they've lost the plot at this point. They're pointing to them standing there and saying, I'm a Democrat. And they go, no, God, terrorist. I mean, that's hyperbolic. That's over the top, but that's the point that's happening. If you're rewriting his history, you're full of shit. That's what she said. And that's endlessly inciting violence. I mean, it's just, I mean, you could take 30 seconds and find a better example. I almost think the whole point is to drive it into an area where it's subjective and completely up in the air because then they can do it wherever they want. Makes sense, doesn't it? Because otherwise, you'd have to laugh at why they're making it so, you could argue what she's doing is insensitive and causes people to act crazy. Maybe that'd be much easier to sell. But you just go full Zionist, like we expect. Most violent thing that's ever happened in humanity, Trump says, or whatever. Come on, guys. Like, that's ridiculous. The White House. Ilhan Omar, right? Saying something that you might find disrespectful. Okay. The White House comes out and says, does Ilhan Omar know these people? Are they from her wonderfully managed home country of Somalia? And it says, breaking, 8 charged in massive Medicare fraud scheme and resulted in $8.4 million stolen in Medicaid billing in Minnesota. Okay, where she represents it. Okay. Here's the people that are charged. Okay. Like, so your argument is just to go Minnesota, therefore they're probably from her country, and they look their names, they're probably associated with her somehow, or just screaming it out there with a face to make people look at that and go, maybe we should do something about that. Look, no matter how you want to spin this, you could easily argue that doing this, calling her sinister and inciting violence and a Democrat terrorist, and then saying that, or then subtly or not so subtly suggesting that because people are in Minnesota and have names from Somalia, that therefore she's secretly working with them without any evidence, that's not inciting anything. We've already seen people from both sides create radical action based on insinuated problems. Yep, that's the whole point, and they do it anyway. But I would never argue that them saying something is their legal responsibility for somebody else doing something. But as Quandale points out, very impressive, very nice. Okay, now where's the Epstein files? Exactly. But just recognize how insane this is. that what they're doing, he just, what, ponder face? What? Ponder what the White House points to what Trump just says with nothing to back it up? I mean, you could argue that's even slander or libel, guys. Here's what Nick Sorter has to say. First, I'll play the clip and then laugh at this child cheering for somebody that says something so stupid.
I think she should be impeached. I think she's terrible. Is she originally from Somalia? Yes, sir. So how are they doing this? How's their government? Do they have a president? Do they have a council?
Oh, that's nice. I'm glad he's informed about foreign affairs.
Do they have anything? Do they have police? I love these people that come from a place with nothing. With nothing. No anything. And then they tell us how to run our country.
So no, we're just talking about random Somalians now? As if that somehow represents who she is? I mean, this is an embarrassing level of stupidity, guys. It's subjective. It's broad stroking. It's everything we've always talked about from either side as being, I mean, this is what uninformed people do. And it's pretty alarming that the president has no idea about the foreign policy dynamics of another country.
I think if she got censored, that's great. If she got impeached, that's even better.
If she got censored, that's great. Or censured. I couldn't tell exactly. Either way, that's crazy. Like the president's floating the idea that because of free speech, she should be attacked or removed from Congress, which is what he's floating.
They impeached me twice for nothing.
Oh, okay. So it's okay then. You see where this all comes from? They did it to me first. You're a child. So we should cheer on the wrong thing we all criticized because they did it to me first. So you're exactly the same problem.
And they impeached me knowing the Republicans are on my side, so they knew it was just that they impeached me. She should be impeached. And
see, even that short comment, he already veered into how great he was and my thing, and I was a part of this, and they did it to me. Oh, wait, back to her. Like his level of narcissism is wild to me. Like he can't respond to a question without somehow folding in what he did at one point. And half the time, it's not even related to the conversation. But either way, she should be impeached. That's what he said.
I think she should be impeached.
Starts like that way, ends like that. Okay. Based on what? Now, look, you want to be honest about this and objective. I think you can impeach all of them. I think almost every one of them in some way or another has shown themselves to be a criminal, whether it's insider trading, whether it's allowing a genocide, whether it's all sorts of criminal activities that these people all allow. So that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not pretending like they're not in some way or another dishonest or criminal. I believe that. What I'm saying is that what he's pointing to is none of those things because they're all doing that. He's pointing to things that should be protected under free speech or that are simply. And Nick Sorter says, while aboard Air Force One, President Trump calls for Ilhan Omar to be expelled from Congress after she glorified Kirk's killing. She's from Somalia. These people come from a place with nothing and they tell us how to run our country. Expel and deport. Guys, these people are it's insanely dumb. And yet they get driven by these fake algorithms to the top of the conversation at 1 million views or followers. Expel and deport. You're talking about an American citizen. You're talking about a U.S. congressman. And you're literally you're saying that because people from Somalia are gross, that's what your argument is, that she should be deported because she said something about Kirk that we disagree with. You're an absolute child. I mean, it's just one of the worst examples of people that he is cheering for unconstitutional actions, for subjective attacks on people based on their ideas, or deporting her. Under what context? You see my point, guys? These people are the ones that are cheering on the destruction of this country because they think they're winning something. And really, they're liking that they feel like they're important right now. Sad. Randy Fine. We hear you loud and clear, Mr. President. We're right there with you about removing her from Congress because she said something they don't like. I mean, guys, like I said at the beginning, this is crazier than the left was doing at the peak of this stuff. Now, we've seen a lot of censorship and a lot of insane, large, broad, social media, removal from companies, fired, all sorts of stuff. But didn't they just tell us that's okay, though? Because it is, because companies can fire people based on those ideas, but they hated it. Just like, I would argue it's wrong, but they have a right to do it. But see, now they're protecting it. The point here is that Ilhan Omar didn't break the law. She literally stood up and said something about Charlie Kirk, and you're trying to get it removed from Congress, let alone deported from the country. It's over the top. And my point was that they're taking this to a level that is so much further than the real outcome of what happened from the left. You're talking about removing somebody from a position of power based on words that are allowable, or rather all protected under free speech. That's the point. A more focused version of it, wildly increased. Laura Loomer. President Trump just called out Ilhan Omar for marrying her brother. President Trump can permanently have Omar removed from Congress by designating the Muslim Brotherhood as a terrorist organization. Yeah, sure, why not? So we don't like her here, even if you say she's a criminal, let's say, which is not the case with what we're pointing to, other than the other stuff. Let's say, okay, let's say we want her removed. That's what's happening. Trump floats the idea of getting her out of Congress. So Laura goes, hey, I know what we do. We designate that group a terrorist, even though you could make the arguments. Therefore, that will allow us to remove her from Congress. Okay, so the point is, let's just make that case so we can go after her. I mean, they don't even try to hide what they do, which shows me that they're actually not that smart. Like, I don't think she even realizes that you could make a legal case about what they're doing right here based on what she just tweeted. They don't care, because I don't even think they're that smart. I think they're being driven to do these things by people that are okay letting them fall. She says, that's how you get rid of Omar and Tlaib. They've taken money from them. It's just wild. Now, look, there's an actual, you could make a very real case about Muslim Brotherhood and plenty of other conversations, or Israel for that matter, who gets money to all of them, including Laura. My point, regardless, is that there's legal actions here. There's constitutional rights, and all they're really doing is saying they said things we disagree with. Therefore, let's make the case to remove them. Not that we actually care about Muslim Brotherhood. Not really. Not from the real perspective of the U.S. government. Otherwise, it would have happened a long time ago. They're just using it like they use everything else. But guess what? Laura Loomer speaks up, right? She says, do that. Declare them this so we can go after people for personal reasons. What does Nancy Mace do? She literally tags Laura Loomer the same day and says, we introduced a bill to designate the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization. Laura Loomer can say the dumbest thing in the room, and Nancy Mace makes it into a bill and runs it forward. Isn't that terrifying? I mean, I don't even know how in the world this makes sense unless there's something else driving this in. Why in the world would anybody, even if they agree with each other, support somebody like Laura Loomer in a position like this? That is so counter to any like an actual politician. You know, somebody who actually cares about whether they get votes from their constituents, not that they get put in power by something else. It's just mind-blowing to me. And I said, so apparently, verifiably dishonest and manipulative Zionists like Laura Loomer are now setting policy for the U.S. government. Unfortunately, this is really nothing new. Outrageous, guys. Oh, see, look, this is so funny. I just saw this in the corner of my eye. Okay, so what did we just say? I'm not commenting on whether or not Muslim Brotherhood should be designated. You see how easy it is to sidestep these things? I'm commenting on the reality of how it's being used and the idea that whether or not you agree with the outcome, that she's simply taking policy suggestions from Laura Loomer. This person says, why on earth should we not? Do you have a reason not to? It's just, you're missing the point, bud. And I think that's on purpose. Nancy Mace, we'll do whatever it takes to send her back, Mr. President. Ilhan Omar's country of Somalia is plagued by a lack of central government. Like, he just gets this stuck in his mind on Air Force One and then just vomits this out on Truth Social. It's insane. And he goes on to say, after all this things negative about her country, which why does that have any relevance on what she's doing in this country? And it goes on to say, wasn't she the one that married her brother? Is it true? Do you have any facts to back it up? I mean, it's just funny what they're doing. And he says, what scum we have in our country. Now she's scum? Telling us what to do and how to do it. She's elected, you clown. Like, even if you, like me, don't believe that that's what actually how this works, the logic, the rhetoric is that you're all put there by your constituents. And so now you're angry because she's speaking up about her opinions? I mean, I actually get, like, again, there's moments where you look at these people and you go, okay, there's no way they're actually the ones making these decisions. It says, thank you for the attention on this matter. And her point is to send her back to Somalia. You're literally talking about a sitting member of Congress, an American citizen, and saying, we'll find a way to send her back to her country. And that's not supposed to be racist? These people are absolutely, completely disconnected from reality. And here is Omar, or rather Nancy Mace, saying Ilhan Omar is an enemy of the state. An enemy of the state? Now who's inciting anything? Still, I would argue that it's not their responsibility legally for people that act based on those statements. But now you're literally saying she's an enemy of the state. Not that every Democrat's terrorist, that she's an enemy of the state. And if somebody goes and takes somebody out, I mean, let's compare somebody calling Trump a fascist to somebody calling her an enemy of the state, part of a terrorist organization. What do you think might incite more violence? But let's be clear for the 45th time. Regardless of whether she said go kill Ilhan Omar, I would argue it's not her. She's not legally responsible for the crime. People would disagree with that. But let's make it more general for most people that if she says something like this, that can be considered incitement. I still don't, there's no legal reality in my mind that means they should be legally responsible for somebody else committing a crime. Free speech, guys. Let's be honest about this and stop letting them play us. But here is what Mehdi Hasan said. If anything, God forbid, happens to Ilhan Omar, right? Tomorrow, today, per the GOP logic of the last few days, and Nancy Mace included, the blood will be on Nancy Mace's hands, right? Just pure relentless incitement here, right? She knows what she's doing. Multiple men are already in prison for trying to kill Omar, which is true. Still, my stance is the same. But if you're going to take what they're saying at face value, you have to acknowledge that what they're doing is exactly the same. Yes, same point for the 100th time, and we all see it. Call it out, shove it in people's faces, make them recognize that they're supporting a group that is trying to drive them to civil war. He also points out Laura Loomer, who said this, and this is what, I've seen her do this like 5 times. I was blown away the last time she did it. And the same point I make. How is it possible that she says these kind of things with the influence, the rate she has, the connection to the top of the power structure, and we don't recognize that where is this coming from? I know she's a racist, disgusting, vile person on this platform, but she says, why do we even have Muslims in Congress? I mean, think about what she's saying. Not other religions. Not like her argument is not, it should only be Christian. You understand? Her argument is just Muslims shouldn't be there. And she says, what a stain on our country. Muslims in general. Yeah, but also screams about how we have rights and freedom of religion, but that one's bad. She is a living, walking hypocrisy. Everything about her is she is the living embodiment of that term. And Nancy Mace says, I'm not taking lectures on stability from an unofficial recruiting arm of ISIS and Hamas, talking about Ilhan Omar. You're saying that she's an unofficial recruiting arm of ISIS? That's 6 different ways now they frame them as actual threats, like targets, terrorists, people that are about to destroy the country. And that's not incitement, I guess. Mehdi says, this is a top advisor to the president, Loomer. If every top political journalist at the Post, Times, CNN, etc., isn't covering this and making it a scandal out of this, it's another reminder that they are soft on Trump and okay with Islamophobia. You can take it forever you want. That is disgusting, objectively disgusting, and clearly to argue that every Muslim is a problem is the root of this, and it's where it's Zionism, guys. It's everywhere. It has overtaken this conversation, and it's not, I think, supported by the majority of Americans, which is the point. And of course, Randy Fine. Here's Charlie Kirk from June 1st. Islam is not compatible with Western civilization. Just to make that clear, that's the same exact statement. Or rather, not exact, but the same, sentiment is the idea is that all of Muslims are a problem. Randy Fine says this. James Lee rightly points out, yet Charlie's most rabid enemies were Zionists. Let that speak for itself. Now, just to end so you understand this, guys, you may not think about this, because the way they frame this, they make it sound like it's some separate concept, okay? Adherents of Islam are Muslims, who are estimated to number 2 billion worldwide and the world's second largest religious population after Christians. Muslims believe that Islam is the complete and universal version of a primordial faith that was revealed many times through earlier prophets and messengers, including Adam, Noah, Abraham, Moses, and Jesus. Muslims consider the Quran to be the verbatim word of God and the unaltered final revelation. Now, you could argue that there's different aspects, just like you can say like the Talmud versus I'm blanking on them. Give me the other one in the chat. The point is that there's what are like the core doctrine of most Muslims, or in the case of Judaism, same point. And then there's versions of it that are more radical and break off and create like similar spin-offs, just like there's different spin-offs of Christianity. And what they do is they take the most ridiculous radical parts of it and frame that as what everybody thinks. That's the MEMRI channel that Loomer and Alex Jones and every one of them point to and go, look at bad Muslims. And you can quite literally prove that company, or company, but platform is run currently by Israeli intelligence. I can get it to come up right here. I put this clip out for a reason. So this is the clip. I'm calling out Laura Loomer for doing it. You've seen this channel. They always point to this channel when they want to make a case about this. The reality is it's currently, and you can look it up on Wikipedia, run currently by active Israeli intelligence and was founded by core Israeli intelligence. And they point to it to make these cases. I'll include it. Watch it for yourselves. Overall, their whole game is to make this case. Now, yes, are there examples of people in this do bad things? Yes, like anywhere, like any religion. There's an entire past of Christians carrying out all sorts of acts based in the name of God that took a lot of life. It's always subjective. You can decide for yourself if you think one's worse than the other, but realize that acting like every single part of one entire group of 2 billion people are all one thing is just an example of how disgusting people like Laura Loomer are. And they're driving it in for one obvious reason, because Israel wants that. Now, that's my opinion. But I think you can look for yourself and look at the long track record, the times, the actions, when they pull punches and when they don't, aligned with what's going on in the world. And you can quite easily see that it's all about that agenda. Now, last 2 points. Actually, this was the last thing. Last point. Senate Republicans put this out. And we just went over this yesterday. The idea of this, the way they manipulate these. We talked about January 6th. We talked about trucker convoys, where you can go back and look at the ADL numbers and they can go, look at how everything's right-wing terrorism, right? And then you can point out that what do they do? And you could prove it. They said red hats. They said certain types of protests that you're a racist, or they're rather a fascist, a radical. And they made up those statistics about you, right? The same group you pretend you're on the side of if you're listening to the team. Then the same thing happened the other ways, right? Where you have the left who's doing the same thing and they make it about, or rather the right that makes it about, well, you go either way. The case today, I forget which way I started, is about the idea that you have the, right now. I missed the point that I said. General point before I lose my thought here is that we have the example of them framing people. That's what it was. I got it back to the main point. They called you racist and terrorist because you had red hats. They called them racist and terrorists because they wave a Palestinian flag. The point is that both those numbers are false. Now, that doesn't mean every single part of those numbers. There may be somebody out there who is. The reality is when they say all right-wing violence, I can prove to you that it's a bloated number. Just like right now, when they say it's all left-wing violence, I can prove to you that it's the same kind of thing. Now, where the nuance is, you can decide for yourself. But we pointed to the studies. By the way, the DOJ just deleted a study that they had hosted on the website that literally said it was mostly right-wing violence. Why would they delete that? They didn't even make a comment about it. They just deleted it, moved it away. We had it saved. I said the same thing then. Senate Republicans post this, doing the same thing back. And it says, political violence is not a both sides issue. And they just show you this. I mean, it does give you this, which says todayugov.com, but it doesn't give you a link. There's always a reason they do that, because you don't get to look to it. Where's the data come from? Where do they get? Where are the different points? Right? What's the categories? Is it from one state? Is it from the whole country? Like, it's just obvious that they want to control your view. So they give you a screenshot. Thank you, Twitter files. The real point. Dark mode says, hey, Grok, has the majority of political violence in the last 20 years been committed by far right or far left or far right? Here's what Grok says. Based on data from the ADL, CSIS, and DHS reports, so both 2 of those out of 3 are U.S. government things that the right has been in and out of the entire time and currently controls, and it goes right up to 2025, most U.S. domestic extremist murderers, which are pretty small at the end of the day, our terror incidents are linked to far-right ideologies. Which, by the way, they then just list off as white supremacy, anti-government, which, by the way, are not at all uniquely right-wing. So see how this game works? But either way, what I find hilarious is that Grok is telling you that they're lying to you based on the actual statistics that they have collected. But then I can equally, like I just said, tell you that those are based on a lot of embellished lies. But it goes both ways. But even though that's the case, they still tell you that based on that data and the people that they, like themselves, DHS and ADL, that it's largely far right. Now, I genuinely think that's because the agenda, it seemed very clear, was meant to lean into the January 6th right-wing vanilla ISIS terrorist. And that just didn't go the way of the plan. That's what I think. So I guess they're playing it the other way now. But yet they just can't, I think they could conduct a much better propaganda campaign. I really do. It's like they're just not thinking these things through. I don't really understand it. Overall, recognize they're all lying to you. That ultimately comes down to the obvious situation where the government wants to control your life. We all seem to be able to know that when it's part looking at the other side. Maybe just take a step back and realize that it might just be everywhere. And if you can at least consider that, it's amazing how quickly it all comes into view. It's like it's like the first time you stop watching corporate media and then you go back and you're like, how did I ever watch this? It is like watching a cartoon and you go, how did I ever give this any real credence? It's the same thing. The moment you really start to look critically at the whole picture, both of the government as a whole or the two parties they pretend to be, you just can't come back from it. And then even if you do believe that it is divided, you still recognize the benefit in acknowledging it as one thing. Just start calling this stuff out, guys, because it's being used against you every which way. The effort is to get you to call out your neighbor, to rationalize the undermining of your constitutional rights and drive in rationalized political violence that they just point to the side. And they can use these things. When you get to a point to where an event can be executed and then they can react to that event and then shut down whatever they want, whenever they want, and keep like an ongoing emergency in 17 different ways, you're never free of that. Right. And then, of course, you add over the AI panopticon technocratic hellscape they're building and look, and when I do that, I'm never trying to make it like we're screwed. I don't believe that. I wouldn't do this if I believed that. I'm trying to show you the concern for what is coming. They're building that world. I am convinced that we can not just change it, we can stop it if we truly want to. The problem is that these partisan divisions and these games that are played and all the screaming liars at the top of the paradigm keep people from seeing it, or at the very least, keep the majority from recognizing that they are the majority. Consider what we've said today. If you want to support this platform, plenty of ways to do so beneath the video on the website. We need your support, and we're gonna keep going no matter what, and we get attacked every single day. But if you believe in what we're doing, we put this out for free. Show us what it's worth to you. What value do you find in this? And if that's a letter of kind encouragement, it means the world to me. Reach out, let me know. I love you all. As always, question everything. Come to your own conclusions. Stay vigilant.